Oh. Welcome everyone. It is 6:30 p.m. on Wednesday, April 28th, regular scheduled select board meeting. I find that as chair of the Norwich Select Board, that I find that due to the state of emergency declared by Governor Scott and as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and pursuant to Addendum 6 to Executive Order 0120 and Act 92, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. In accordance with Act 92, location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with the temporary amendments to the open meeting law, I confirm that we have provided public access to the meeting by Zoom with additional access offered through the telephone. We are using Zoom and the electronic telephone and the telephone for this remote meeting. All members of the board have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through this platform. The public have access to contemporaneously listen and, if desired, participate in the meeting by raising your hand if you're on Zoom, and if you're on the phone, please press *9, and then you may press *6 to unmute yourself once recognized. There's a mechanism, there's a telephone number, should anyone in the agenda, if anyone has issues accessing this meeting. And that's it. I stumbled because I read the script. Usually I have internalized it. Okay. With that, I'm here, Marcia Calloway, Claudette Brochu, Robert Gear, Mary Layton are all here, and then also Herb Griffey, our town manager. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Marcia. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, thank you. The next is public and select board comment. And so the public are invited to speak to any item that is not on the agenda. Okay, Linda Cook, I see your hand. Go ahead. Please press *6, Linda. Go ahead.
Yes, just a quick question. Are the items on number 4 going to be discussed tonight? I'm guessing they are.
The town manager report, yes, they will be discussed. The items that are listed in the action will be discussed as part of that report.
Okay, I was just wondering the DPW and the American Reserve Deck. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Any select board comment?
I have a correction to minutes if we're at that stage.
We will at the next agenda item, which I'm going to just move us along to, if that's all right. So the next is the consent agenda. So in approving the consent agenda, we will receive correspondence. We will authorize the signature for AP warrants. We will approve one of the warrants includes a kids bridge expenditure, and we will also approve the meeting minutes. Anything that requires, we'll have a discussion period when that motion is made, but anything that would require significant discussion, we usually pull. So anything that we would like to pull. Go ahead, Claudette.
Sorry, Roger, I would like to back up to the agenda. I noticed that the Article 36 Planning Commission and Energy Commission people weren't included in the appointments.
So they are. So thank you for exposing how the sausage gets made, I guess is an expression. So you'll see that the applications are listed under the packet materials, and then under action, I listed Article 36. So I had asked Miranda if she would be so kind as to fill in the full listing, but they're just divided in 2 different places. Does that help answer your question? There isn't an application for the Article 36 task force members in the packet materials because the appointment process was through their recommendation and then our approval.
And I don't see it as on the motion sheet.
Okay, so let's make note of that, but it's definitely under, so it's definitely listed as part of the agenda.
Okay, thanks.
But thank you. It's just in 2 different places because of some clerical nonsense.
And then
Well,
I have,
Wait, excuse me, just to clarify, so that was the Article 36, was it one other item for appointments?
it was the Article 36 Planning Commission appointee and
Okay.
Energy Committee appointee.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Claudette.
And then I just have some questions on the AP warrants, nothing to pull out. I just,
So maybe perhaps in the discussion period of the approval of the, of that motion, we can discuss that. But if anything else is significant that we want to pull, perhaps correspondence, let me know that now so we could. Does anyone have anything they would like to pull?
Yeah, yes, I'd like to pull the Alyssa Close letter, the correspondence. And
Okay.
I also have questions for the AP warrant.
Okay. And then Marcia says that she wanted to correct the minutes. So how about let's make a motion to include the pulling of that correspondence and the minutes, and then the questions about the AP warrant can be discussed in the discussion period.
And
Go ahead.
Can I
Marcia.
just, ask, are we going to be discussing the Stuart Richards issue?
If you would like to pull that correspondence, that would be something else to pull, but it's not on the agenda.
Probably should. Pull it, please.
Okay, so who would like to make a motion with everything that we just discussed?
So I'm getting this a little bit of not understanding. So if we move to approve, but that just say that we're going to pull those items, is that going to be sufficient?
Yeah, so we'll make, yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for.
Okay, well, I move to approve the consent agenda, but to pull the AP warrant, Alyssa Close letter, minutes, and the Stuart Richards correspondence.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Marcia was the second. Okay, now we just made a motion to approve the consent agenda, pulling these items. So the discussion, I think at this point, is a discussion of actually the AP warrants. So,
Well, isn't it of everything we pulled or nothing that we pulled?
so we made a motion that approved the consent agenda, pulling these items. So we'll vote to approve these afterwards. But right now we're in the discussion period of approving the consent agenda. So I think it's appropriate to discuss the warrants.
Except that I listed that as one of the items pulled.
Oh, did you? Okay, thank you.
Yes.
I didn't hear that. Okay,
So it's the rest of it, right?
so we've essentially pulled the consent agenda to discuss,
Okay.
it, but that's okay. So all in favor? Okay, great. Now let's begin with what we'd like to discuss first. Let's discuss the AP warrants. Go ahead.
Claudette, you want to go first?
sure. I noticed in the AP warrants, there's a expenditure to McNeil, our old town attorneys on page 4. And I wonder why that would be.
They're still our attorney for personnel.
Okay. And then if you could explain all of the billing errors for Pike Industries.
That was my question, one of mine.
Masaki, in going through the billing, identified some errors that Pike made. So these are revised billings based on the observation of Masaki, the assistant at DPW.
Does that happen on a consistent basis that she double checks?
She always double checks. Yeah, this is one major improvement to DPW in terms of being able to examine these particular things.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So
Yeah,
these
no,
were errors on Pike's part?
Yes,
Okay,
Did you have another one, Claudette?
no, that was it.
Okay.
I wondered why on the warrant, it seemed to me there was an ambulance bill where the same amount was listed at least twice. What was that about?
Our ambulance bill is quarterly, and Becky breaks it down by month so that it's easier
Okay.
to track in the system. Yep.
There's 3 of them, okay. That's it on my AP warrant questions.
I have to ask about the rabbit.
Oh, the bunny, yes.
I point that out because it's a first for me. Marcia, you don't know my opinion, but I don't believe that we should be taking care of cats as part of animal control, but the board overruled me on that, I don't know, a year or so ago. This is a first where somebody found a rabbit on the side of the road, and we've been charged for the care of the rabbit for basically 10 days of care, which under the statute for animal control, 10 days is the sort of the statute of limitations for care. This is one of these things that I don't think the town should be absorbing the cost for, but
Yes, it was an issue that has not been follow up after a considerable amount of time. But we talk about that in some of our materials submitted today. But yes, thanks, Herb.
Thank you.
So I apologize. I should have asked for a motion, and then we should have been chatting about this during the discussion period. So let's make a motion for the AP warrants to receive them or to approve them.
I move to receive and approve the AP warrant.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, great. Thank you. The next thing we wanted to pull was, Marcia, I think you keep your papers near your mic.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Housekeeping. No, it's okay, but yeah.
I'm a repeat offender. I apologize.
Okay. The next, let's discuss the Alyssa Close correspondence. Can I begin with a motion to receive it?
Okay, I move to receive the Alyssa Close letter.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Marcia. That was made by Mary. Okay, any discussion? Go ahead.
I wanted to bring it out because Alyssa is applying to be on our planning commission. So I don't know if she's here to shed light on this letter. I was surprised by the detail in the letter. It seemed to me, when I've had the occasion to read through some of the developmental review board reviews, it had that level of detail. And I don't actually know why it's in the packet this time, whether it is a neighborhood thing that she has a neighborhood interest, or whether it's also support for her involvement in the planning board. So maybe we could keep it in mind when we come to the appointments or ask her about it, but I just wanted to us to notice that, that's all.
Sure. I saw it more as information for us to know. And I believe that these discussions are happening or have happened or currently happening with the Development Review Board. Herb is nodding. So I think it's information for us to know and correspondence to receive.
Information for us to know in the context of Alyssa being considered for the planning board, or just general information for us to know, because we don't usually consider what the developmental review board is doing.
she's one of a group that is opposed. Oh, is essentially opposed. She's here to speak for herself. Sorry, I didn't see that.
Okay, so they are separate issues.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Just wanted clarity on that.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Is there anything that I can answer for you, Mary? Sorry, I was having a
No,
little
I just
trouble.
Well-
This is Lisa Close.
Yes,
My submission has nothing to do with my planning commission.
Okay.
Those two things happen entirely separately. And the submission to you guys related to the application up here was because of some inconsistencies that we as neighbors had concerns about, and we just wanted to make you aware. So that's it.
okay,
It relates to concerns, but they're two
Great.
separate issues.
completely different things. Thank you for that
Yeah.
clarification. Thank you.
Oh, yep.
Thanks for being here too.
Go ahead, Marcia.
If I could just ask her, Lisa, if
Yes.
for some reason that you thought that our there was something beyond the scope of the DRB that was more in line with the select board. Were you asking for some action or just for FYI?
I was more interested in an FYI. I had seen, I would say one of the things that concerned me was in reading back through minutes from DRB and Planning Commission, and that just as a way to inform myself. I'm new to town, and so I was looking to inform myself about how meetings went and so on and so forth, but it didn't take too long before it looked to me like, based on the other life that I was living with respect to this development, that there had been differences in the way that projects had been approached in the past, the degree to which applicants were accountable for providing accurate information prior to hearings and so on, things like that. And so with those concerns, I just wanted to it seemed like rehash to let the DRB know that we've made that statement with them. And so you were the next step up the ladder.
Okay, that's helpful.
Sure
Okay.
thing. Thank you so much for listening.
Go ahead, Claudette.
Yeah, there's, and I think Rod will be speaking to this. It seems to me that there are specific steps that are taken with regards to planning applications and DRB submissions, and that is not, one step is not the select board. I would believe the next step is court.
So I'm actually, this is, I'm happy to entertain this a little bit further because we're receiving correspondence and we're discussing, and this is not an agenda item, but if it's okay with, I'm going to go to Rod. Rod, I know Herb could probably also add some clarity, but Rod's here. So Rod, can you just clarify some jurisdiction questions that we all seem to be sort of chatting about?
Sure. Hello, everybody. This is Rod, the planning director and the zoning administrator. So Ms. Close's correspondence pertains to an application by her neighbors for road access, a so-called access permit, and also the review of a so-called private road. So so to be clear, access permits are actually issued by the Director of Public Works. That's Larry, and the administrative aspect of that permit are undertaken by planning and zoning. So that is, the application is submitted to our office and then transmitted to Public Works, and we track Public Works in terms of issuing a decision. As far as I'm aware, the application was received some time ago. There's been some correspondence between the applicant's engineer, Summit Engineering, and Larry, including a site visit. We've not actually, as far as I'm aware, received anything in response from the applicant's engineers to a set of questions from Larry. We don't know the current status of their intentions at this point. And so there is no necessary deadline. So the steps would be that first they would obtain an access permit, and then if they were able to obtain an access permit, which would be consistent with the standards that are contained in the Norwich Ordinance, then they would have to proceed to obtain a zoning permit for the development, which would be, in this instance, the private road. And so the standards that Alyssa has helpfully outlined in the memo to you, some of those are relevant at the very least. But at this point, what we don't have is a finalized access permit application. And certainly what I know is that the Director of Public Works has not issued an access permit. So we're just in this kind of waiting space. If we hear from the applicants that they've withdrawn the access permit application, then that's one thing. Or if so typically in these instances, the engineering aspects of the application are what the Public Works Director reviews with the applicants and their consulting engineers.
Great. So that was helpful for establishing sort of the jurisdiction question. So Marcia, go ahead. You can have a follow-up.
Quick-
You want to move
yes,
on?
Thank you. A quick question. What I heard Lisa say was that the elements of evidence were different for this case as opposed to other cases. So that's what I'd like to find out. Can you just answer that yes or no? Is it different or the same?
I'm not going to be able to give you a yes or no answer. I can say that most applications are different and they have unique features. Some of those unique features include the people actually putting application together. So this is an out-of-town engineer. The information that they needed to submit for the subdivision was complete and met the requirements of the regulations, and the subdivision and that was part of the subdivision application, which has subsequently been withdrawn. So I would say that there's quite a bit of variability in the contents of applications, and it was deemed complete by me as a zoning administrator, and it was also deemed complete by the DRB.
Okay, great. And so I'm going to take this discussion to a close, but I think there's some threads for possible future discussion to the extent that our jurisdiction merits it. So we've had, I'm going to end the discussion, and then I'm going to all in favor to receive this correspondence. So I'm asking a question. All in favor? Please raise your hand. Great. We've received the correspondence. Thank you. Is there a motion? We had another item of correspondence. Can we make a motion to receive that, please?
I guess
Please.
Should do that, Marcia. Yep.
I move to accept, I haven't done one of these before, to accept the correspondence from Stuart Richards.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Great. Made by Marcia, seconded by Mary. Please discuss. Go ahead, Marcia.
To the extent that there's any merit to the timing of the actions in terms of the response to Mr. Katuki, et cetera, I think that should be sort of addressed by the Planning Commission to make sure that the commission is meeting before they make representations for the commission.
I actually have a comment about this, if that's okay. I don't know if anyone else has something further. But so for me, my interpretation is a little bit different of this, of what happens when someone writes something and it gets picked up by the press, as it did in this instance. It went out to Daybreak, which we may consider a news outlet because there's at least 10,000 subscribers. So, you know, a large Upper Valley community saw a bit of what they understand to be news, right? And so I think it's really important that a chair who often works with newspapers and the press to give statements on behalf of the governing body does so and is proactive about it. So I think it's really important and thoughtful that the chair of this body saw inaccuracies in a statement and went to correct it. And I would think procedurally, if I had to check in with the four of you every time the Valley News called me, I think some of them are on the line today in our meeting, they wouldn't get a quote. They wouldn't ever get a quote from this board about anything, because I would have to coordinate with all of you, some of whom work during the day, right? So I do want to make that point, that when you're a chair, you do speak on behalf of the governing body, and it is my hope that you do so in a way that reflects the consensus of the governing body. And the only thing I would say is, if you don't have that trust, or if you don't have a body that sort of shares the same understanding of facts, then that's a different conversation, which we might want to consider, because we make these appointees. That's
so
what
I guess the confusion to me then is that I didn't see her as answering a news outlet. I saw her as answering a resident of the town.
Right. I can see that. Thank you. But you would agree that it's appropriate for a chair to talk to a news outlet?
I think to the extent that sometimes it's appropriate, yes, there has to be a comment.
Okay. Go ahead, Mary.
I appreciate your reasoning, Roger, and we had talked about this, and I hadn't thought of it from that point of view. I also think there's a lot of rancor on the Planning Commission. I don't think there is trust among all members. And my idea about that, if that is the case, then I think it would be, to my mind, better if they just worked in a more formal way. And if you're working in a more formal way, I think you would probably want to run the correspondence by the rest of the planning commission in a meeting. It does slow everything down, and I think to the extent that factual errors were made in a blog, it would not be corrected for quite a long time. But I think there's kind of a balancing there. Personally, I think trust is extremely valuable. I think you can put economic value on trust. And I'm a little annoyed, actually, with the planning commission, because I think, either they need formality or they need trust, one or the other, or they're just not going to be functional. So I'll just put that out.
Okay. Any further comments, Claudette? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to correct one. The fact that Melissa Horowitz responded to Chris and included in that correspondence the members of the Planning Commission does not in and of itself breach the open meeting law. And the fact that Jackie Allen added a comment does not breach the open meeting law. So I think there is confusion on the part of the public about the provisions of the open meeting law.
Okay. So we've had a discussion. It's 6:57. We're 2 minutes over our next agenda item. So if it's okay, I would like to take a motion to accept this correspondence.
We have the motion, we just need to vote.
Yeah, to vote, excuse me. So all in favor of accepting this correspondence, raise your hand. Thank you. And then there was one more, it was the minutes.
Right, on page, I don't know, it's page 36 of the PDF document.
Mhm.
I didn't say that the select board can take direct action. What I was actually doing was quoting the statute to say that the town manager is ultimately under the direction of the select board, and that any contract language could stipulate that the position and policing in general should be carefully reviewed in a study to include the select board and the public.
So Marcia, can I propose that you make your correction in the form of a motion?
Yes.
Thank you.
I move that the minutes be corrected on page 36 of the packet to read that Callaway cited 24 VSA 1233.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Great. Any further discussion on that correction? Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Pam Smith, I see that you have your hand up. I think, please go ahead and make a comment.
Pam Smith, 1445 New Boston Road. On the consent agenda, I did have one question about that Children's Bridge expense. Is that an expense that's the town is paying for, or is that coming from private donation funds?
I need a point of order. You have to address the minutes before you move on to a separate item.
Oh, I thought they did.
You have to accept the minute. You've just made, all you did was change. You amended the minutes to read something, but you haven't accepted them.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry to interrupt, Pam.
No, thank you for that point of order. Pam, we'll get to your comment. Now, is there a motion to accept the minutes as amended?
I move to accept the minutes as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Rob. Okay, thank you. Now, any further discussion? No? All in favor? Okay, thank you. And thank you, Herb, for your point of order. And Herb, can you answer Pam Smith's question for us? Because
And due to my disruption, I didn't hear her question about the Kids Bridge.
how is the Kids Bridge being paid for and how is it being managed?
So currently it's being managed through Bree Swenson as the department head for recreation with assistance from Rod Francis in terms of the permitting side of things. And there's a group of volunteers that essentially are trying that report back to Bree as we move forward, but it's being treated as a rec project. And then it's currently been paid for by through the rec designated fund. But there's some not the rec designated fund, there's some reserve funds that have been donated to help pay for that.
Okay. Thank you. Now I would like, if we've gotten through our consent agenda-ish, and let us move on to the town manager's report. So the action on this is update on significant happenings as they relate to finance office staffing, financial reporting, and the writing of financial procedures. Herb, where would it be appropriate for you to turn it over to you?
Yes. So there's a couple things that I want to get through tonight. Sorry, I'm just trying to find myself on the agenda. So besides the financial stuff, I'm going to be asking for a couple motions with regard to the regional energy coordinator and the appointment for the town's rep for that. And then also DPW proposed truck purchase. It's something that's been previously approved by the board, but we finally are seeing the truck and we need to pay for it. So it's authorizing the amount of money from the appropriate designated fund, which corresponds with your previous action from a while ago. But in addition to that, the financial end of things, in a second, I'm going to turn it over to Seth for his last report. Financially, from that standpoint, Seth has been offered a full-time position elsewhere. So really good for him. Unfortunately, it cut short on where I hope that we would have been with Seth, but it's a good move for him. But I do think that he's generally positioned the desktop reporting of the report, that we should be able to pick it up fairly quickly by either another individual that comes in, or at least temporarily from Becky for the next month or so. Given his announcement, and also I was already in the process of doing it, we've gone out to advertise for the 6th time for a finance director related thing. The difference between this advertising is that I've advertised for both full-time and or part-time, no less than 20 hours a week. So the difference being is that if we can find the full-time, great. But also if there is somebody that's out there that could do this on a part-time basis, that option is out there as well. So again, a little bit different from previous advertisements. So fingers crossed on that one. And then there's some procedural stuff that I've delivered that Seth has started with, that I've delivered off to the chair and the vice chair. At this point, it's not yet ready for prime time because I'm still going through things and trying to get some department head input, but there's quite a few procedures that have been delivered at this point. And they'll ultimately get out to various folks for some perspective. And then those, I'll let Seth, when he talks about it, just indicate, Seth, what are the procedures that you've delivered, such as the grant application process and that type of stuff. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Seth for the monthly report. You did receive in your packet the typical PDF plus the usual reports that I give you, though we focus on the dashboard.
Oh, I'd just like to thank everybody for having me. And Herb, Herb has asked that I can be available if he has questions on the functionality of how this dashboard works. And I said I could be available. So Herb can reach out to me anytime. I'm more than happy to help. Do you want me to put the dashboard up, share the dashboard, or just talk about it?
I'm seeing some nodding of yes from board members.
Yes. Okay. Oh, wait, I gotta share function. That's good. Share this. Everybody see it? Great.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just gonna start from the top and work my way down. First of all, the first thing I started with was looking at overall revenues and overall expenditures for the general fund as compared to budget. As you can see, revenues are 97% of budget, and that's fairly similar to last month, and that's because all property tax billings have been recorded as revenue and billed. And then moving down to actual expenses as compared to budget, I would expect it to be about 75%. So as you can see, it's fairly close at 77%. The reason it's a little bit higher is because long-term debt expenditures that are included, the insurance expenditures are included, and designated fund appropriations have all been expended, and those contribute as well to increasing that above 75%.
Marcia has a question. Go ahead, Marcia.
So Seth, does that explain why we're not 3/4 of the way through the year, but we're 3/4 of the way through the revenue?
You talking the 97%?
The 77% for fiscal year 21.
Yeah, well, so with 77, we would expect expenditures to be about 75%, which is 3/4 of the way of the year.
But we're only,
Fiscal
we're
year
not,
different. It's gonna
And-
end.
Yeah, through March is 3/4 of the way through the year. This is through March, Marcia. So that in our fiscal year, that's 3 months, 3/4 of the way through.
got it.
Sorry, it wasn't clear. Any other questions? No?
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Next, I want to move down to looking at revenues. So as I mentioned before, property tax revenues are fully billed. The other item I want to mention is, scroll down here, miscellaneous revenues. Those are high as compared to budget. And as at the end of during April, I know that Cynthia has been working on reclassing some revenues, miscellaneous revenues, and most of those are all grant revenues that had been recorded there. So that percentage is going to come way down in the April dashboard, and they're all grant classified as grant revenues, and so those got moved to grant revenues.
Did they not have a line item? Is that why we're suddenly seeing like most of the grant revenue is listed? It didn't have an appropriate sort of category?
They had a line item, but they just got misclassified. They just got,
I see. I see.
it was a mistake. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Moving on to expenses.
And then just to point out, especially for Claudette's perspective and for everybody, this is the functional side of the budget. So really kind of a breakdown by department. The other half of the dashboard will be looking at it from an object code standpoint.
Thanks, Herb. Sorry to put that up.
Claudette, did you have a question or a point to make? I saw you maybe your face was maybe signaling such, but I don't want to read into that. Sorry.
Just that it doesn't need to be pointed out to me, that I see it.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, thank you.
All right. Now I'm going to talk about functional expenses. I'm just going to talk about a couple of these line items. Town administration is higher than 75%, and that is because professional service expenditures have been higher. So that increases the budget, increases the expenditures. And one other item I want to talk about is at the very bottom is designated fund appropriations. We made some reclasses in this report to appropriately reflect what was actually designated fund appropriations. So I didn't have any mistakes this time. And so, as you can see,
Sorry, Seth, I don't think we see what you're seeing.
oh, sorry, yeah, my bad. I forgot to. I was looking at. I had
Yeah.
it printed out here. My apologies.
There.
Right there, yeah. Oh, geez, and that's the wrong. I made a mistake. That's the wrong one before I made the reclassification, and so it's just. Yeah. That's the wrong one. I did make an update. I did make it to the back, and I'm sorry, but the number should be 259.8 because I had classified inappropriately electric charging and vehicle expenditures here, and those got moved to those to utilities. And so once we did that, then those two equal, and those equal 259.800, and expenses of 259.800, and so those are at 100%.
Okay, Marcia had a question. Go ahead, Marcia.
Certainly.
You're on mute. Sorry. Marcia, you're on mute. Sorry.
Sorry. So apparently the right thing got in the packet, Seth, so you don't have to worry about that. But
oh yeah, sorry. Good.
This brings up a question. If we have expended all that we had for designated funds, then how, for example, and this is maybe a question more for her, but I think this goes to my confusion. How would we be able to purchase a truck if all of the designated funds have been expended?
Claudette, go ahead. Claudette has her hand up, but
Yeah, Marcia, when they say expended, it just means that amount of money that was voted on and approved in the budget has been moved, I don't want to say moved over, but plugged into that fund.
Herb, do you want to add
If that,
These are, so Marcia, what these represent are actually new allocations that are put in the expenditure budget raised by taxes that ultimately get transferred over into the appropriate designated fund to add to whatever may be in that the designated fund. So these are not the actual designated fund locations where the actual amount is. These are new funds being raised to add to the existing designated funds.
Okay. So does that live in one general account, or?
There's an overall general ledger that has all of these transactions that are accounted for. So for instance, the town budget is a fund within the general ledger, that each of the designated funds are separate funds under the general ledger. So effectively what happens is we want to raise new money to go in there. The operating budget is the place where we record the expenditure. The property taxes or other source of income on the revenue side will come in, and then we expend it out of the expenditure budget, which is effectively a transfer to a different fund under the general ledger.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Claudette, you had a question?
And yeah, and I just wanted to make one other comment that I appreciate that the expenditures are broken down into the various department headings and not just the audited headers.
Right. I guess that's the functional code is what I
Right.
called it. Yes. Okay. Yeah, me too. Any other questions? Otherwise, Seth, if there's a way to sort of neatly wrap up your portion, that would be good.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I just want to mention a couple of other things real quickly. I put a payroll on here just because it's one of the larger expenditures, it's the largest expenditure. And as you can see, it's very close to what the budget should be, running a little bit under. And one of the things I want to point out is on the very last page, on page 4, that right there should be a 31. I made a mistake. That is actually, these are March 31st numbers, but this should be a 31, and that should be a 20, not a 21, because we haven't reached June 30th of 2021 yet. So, but anyways, thank you very much for everything.
Thanks, Seth.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop participant sharing. Okay. And now I want to, Cheryl, I see your hand for a comment, but I actually, Herb, does anyone have any follow-up questions or comments to other items in Herb's sort of town manager report that they would like to ask?
Well, I had a question.
Go ahead.
I think it was in his report on page 47, federal funds. We got $337,166 in April for the, I imagine, Federal CARES Act. And I'm just wondering where that went. What's happened to it?
Question for Herb.
That's for Herb. Yeah.
Sorry, you said the 337,000?
Yeah.
That's the amount that we're expected to get from the American Recovery Plan. We have not received that yet.
Oh, I misread it. I thought it said it came in April.
No, sorry, that's what that as of to date, that is the allocation that the feds have set up for us. The numbers change slightly over time. So yeah, no, that's just was basically trying to give you some information about what seems to be coming and the amount that we would be anticipated to receive.
Thank you.
And Herb indicated to us that the office is prepared to receive it. We've like met all of their boxes. Go ahead, Claudette.
Yeah, just as a follow-up to that, when we receive that money, is there a way that we can not commingle it with in the general fund?
Yeah, I've already had the discussion with Cynthia. We're going to set up a totally separate accounting for it. So in other words, it'll be its own fund. And I will also be making a strong recommendation to you that you not spend any of it until the feds deliver the criteria by which it can be spent under. The reason is that Cynthia and I have both, if you go back to Tropical Storm Irene, there was a lot of money that was given by FEMA to communities. And there are a lot of communities around Vermont that spent the money, and then FEMA sent out the eligible criteria. So there are a lot of communities in Vermont that literally had to send money back to FEMA. So we don't want to repeat, we do not want to be in a situation like that. So until there's criteria, my recommendation is going to be do not spend the money, keep it in a separate accounting, letting it earn whatever interest. And then once we have that criteria, then we can have the discussion about how and when and where.
That's great. Go ahead, Marcia.
I don't know if anyone else listened in on the call with Senator Sanders. Did anyone listen to that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Herb had sent that around.
Yeah.
Anyway, did you?
Yeah.
Herb
Okay.
has.
I took some notes and there were some good ideas from different towns. So I don't know how to share those.
And that was a different pot of money. So that's
Right.
the after school money that's coming in. Yep.
Well, it seemed like people were talking about using things in different ways. And I just thought, when any money is being discussed, some of the ideas that were coming up were pretty valuable. So I wanted to share that somehow.
Claudette, go ahead. Do you have a suggestion?
Yeah, well, and I guess I'm on Herb's side with this and really erring on the side of caution because I believe I read that some of that money cannot be used for transportation projects, that would come out of a separate fund. So I think we just need to sit tight and wait and see what the funds are going to be able to be used for.
Yes, it's for sure to be continued. Yes, yes.
But does anybody want to see those notes?
I think we always, I think it's the way that we have done that before is if you write to us, we can put it as part of a packet. So if you write a memo or a letter or an email even, we'll put it under correspondence if nowhere else.
Okay,
And
thank you.
I'd like to see him, Marcia, and to be able to share him with Bree especially, so.
Yeah, so yes. Okay, so I'll take 2 public comments and then we would like to move on to appointments, and then there's the police chief conversation, and we're about 10 minutes over, just to be conscious of time. So I'll take Cheryl and Linda Cook's public comments on the town manager report. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Hi, thank you. Cheryl Lindbergh, 59 Koch Road. I don't know whether I'll direct it to you, Roger, and it's either Seth or Herb. Looking at the financials, I thought I saw where 98% of the taxes currently are collected. Was that what I saw on Seth's report? And if so, we haven't made a payment to the school district in a couple months, I don't believe. And I was wondering why we wouldn't do that.
As is customary, there's a final payment that we need to make them at the tail end of the year, but until the state sends us what the final figures are for what goes on, we have a mutual understanding between finance offices that we hold off on that last payment. And we've always made that in, say, the May timeframe. So when the state gives us the information, we'll get the money over to them. But we've paid over all that we typically would pay by this time frame, short of that last payment.
Thank you, Herb. Linda Cook, I'll take your public comment on this agenda item and then we'll move on. Star 6, Linda.
I don't have the comments because Claudette and Marcia asked my questions. Thank you.
Great. Representative democracy. Okay. We'll now move on to appointments.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not done with my report yet.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Herb.
There are the two remaining items that what I would like to be able to do in recommending is that the board needs to appoint somebody to that new regional energy committee that we're participating with. Linda Gray, as I understand, will be stepping away as chair of the energy committee. And I think it would be a nice transition since she was so part of the regional energy coordinator discussion. And also she's worked with the gentleman before he went from Hartford to the Regional Planning Commission, that she would be to me would be my recommendation for the appointment that you would make essentially for a 1-year term, according to the motion in your packet or in the that was emailed to you.
Okay, so what I would say that I would have preferred if that would have been listed under appointments, and so that was more of an error on my part. But I would say that the recommendation is noted, and we'll move on that for our next meeting, if that would be okay with other board members and yourself.
Okay, yeah, just make sure there's an understanding that it wasn't out of order, that I was asked to put a memo together for this particular meeting regarding that.
I did, and it's noted and appreciated.
Thank you.
So why are we holding it up, Roger? Why don't we go forward with it?
Because we don't have a function. Well, it's part of the memo is part of the town manager's report. So if board members feel comfortable taking action on something in the town manager's report under that agenda item, I would be fine too. It's just, it may also be considered a part of an appointment process, but not necessarily, because it's not one of our regularly scheduled appointments. So I have just rationalized my way out of 2 explanations, but so I am comfortable taking action on that recommendation from Herb Durfee if other board members would like to.
I'd be comfortable about it if others are.
Excellent. So with that in mind,
Hear from others.
why don't we make a motion and then we'll discuss it in a discussion. So I'll take.
Okay, I'll make a motion. I move to appoint Linda Gray as the town's representative to the Intermunicipal Regional Energy Coordinator Steering Committee for a 1-year term ending on April 30th, 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Rob. It was made by Mary. Okay, now let's discuss that. Go ahead, Marcia.
Do we ever put this out for people to apply like other positions?
So I think the answer is we haven't, this hasn't been one of our regular appointments, which is why I sort of then edited myself away from it being a part of agenda item 5 appointments. I think what we've learned from that memo, or what I possibly learned in conversation with Linda Gray, is that the TRO, the other towns who are participating in this program, have had their representatives be energy committee members typically. And so this recommendation would be to norm in that way. So Linda Gray is an energy committee member, and most of the other people who are reps on this program are also energy committee members. So I will say that. Good, Claudette.
When we first discussed having the Norwich participate in the regional energy coordinator, paying for the regional energy and participating in that work, I recall that as part of that, the representative was either a member of the select board or the energy commission. I think that was part of the charge.
Right, that's right. Thank you, Claudette. Yes.
So
Rob feel about it?
Well, go ahead. I want to make sure we answered Marcia's question. So I'm going to actually go back to
That's true.
Marcia.
That's good. Sorry.
Go ahead. Does that help, Marcia?
yeah, I just want to be sure that there's always consistency. So if we have some things that we always appoint, okay, we should know. And if we have some that, you know, people can stand up and apply for, that should be treated the same way.
Right. And to Herb's earlier point, I asked him to, I didn't ask him to make a recommendation necessarily, because like the board makes that appointee, but I've there was also a memo that he referenced that Linda Gray had wrote that was sort of updating us on what she had heard about what the commission is doing. So I think it's part of that process. That's the process that we have used for the first time right now, if that helps you answer your question.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Okay, that's all in favor. Great, thank you. Herb, did you want to wrap up your town manager's report?
Yeah, and so
Another motion.
lastly, the truck is in the state near us, and based on back in what was it, May 27th of 2020, you authorized the purchase of this particular truck along with two others. We have received it. We need to move forward with fitting it up. Because it's here, we need to pay for it. So what I'm looking for now that you've approved the purchase of it, but what I need is an additional authorization approving it from the respective designated fund, the equipment fund for the DPW, for the amount not to exceed $49,220. This pays for the truck, and then there's additional cost in the future for the fit up with the plows and everything.
Okay.
So I'll move that if it's okay.
Sure.
I move to authorize the expenditure of up to $49,220 from the DPW equipment designated fund for the purchase of a 2021 Ford F-550 as authorized by the select board on May 27th, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Go ahead, Mary.
My only thing about this, I'm kicking myself that in 2020, we weren't thinking more about whether a Ford 550, I don't know if it's one of the big trucks, but just trucks in general, if they could be hybrid or electric, just looking forward in the replacement schedule. And perhaps that's something we talk about when we're doing our capital planning.
And this was during that time frame, that was part of the discussion that we had, that there was the possibility of hiring used vehicles or hybrids. From that standpoint, there was a considerable amount of research that was done by Sonny Llewellyn up at DPW with Larry. They were not able to find what we were particularly looking for the three trucks that you authorized. And this is not a big one like the Freightliner, but it is a 550 that is set up with a front plow and a wing plow, along with a bed on the back to hold sand or salt. but it's
So is
not,
it one
not
ton?
a big freight liner.
Is it a 1 ton?
What it says.
Okay,
Yeah, oh, yeah,
thank
yeah,
you.
because it's in
you.
Larry, that's truck 12, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Marcia.
So when it was approved earlier, was it approved for 49,220 or for 109,000?
Overall was approved for 109,000, which includes the fit up with the plows and everything. So this purchase is simply to get possession of the truck for itself, the truck and cab, and then the all the other stuff we've gone out to bid on, that will be coming back forward for additional approval in the future for the expenditure of that side of it. But we need to get the truck off the lot.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? So I would just say as a matter of procedure that this was part of the town manager's report, and I hadn't necessarily expected that it would be part of the town manager's report. So that's, otherwise this would more typically be a separate agenda item. That being said, it's been pointed out that this was a previous discussion, right? And a previous approval. So I will say that. Pam Smith, I'll take your public comment and then we'll take an action.
Thank you. Pam Smith, 1445 New Boston Road. I didn't see it, but my husband told me that he thought he saw the word biodiesel printed on the DPW trucks on the hood. Can you clarify that? Are these actually biodiesel plows and trucks that we have?
No, we used to use, I think Andy used to use some biodiesel or in some cases you use recycled oil, but we don't use biodiesel that I'm aware of.
Are these trucks actually equipped to use biodiesel fuel? And we're just not doing that?
I don't know that, so I'd have to look it up.
And we're deviating a little bit from what it is we're discussing.
Well, no, Mary talked about, we're trying to be more energy efficient, and biodiesel is one of those ways. So I was just wondering if these are equipped to run biodiesel fuel and we're just not doing that.
Well, I think there's some follow-up, but thank you.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so we're still in the discussion. So I'm going to call the question now for this truck. All in favor? Raise your hand. Okay, thank you. Herb, may we move on to appointments?
Yes, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I appreciate that folks have arrived on time for number 6, but we are running a little, we're running a little bit behind. But if you stay with us, you'll get to see some of the appointment of some of your neighbors with appreciation for your forbearance. So let's begin with the application for the Development and Review Board. Can I have a motion to begin?
Yes, I move to appoint Matthew Stewart to the Development Review Board for a 3-year term expiring on April 30th, 2024.
Is there a second? Seconded by Claudette. Any discussion about this applicant? I don't necessarily see them with us, but they have filled out an application.
Is that a requirement?
It's encouraged.
Also showing up and filling out, well, the application I think is essential, and showing up's really good because then everybody can talk to the applicant about why they want to do it. But I think Matthew has experience. I read the application correctly. He wants to do it, so.
Yes. Claudette, did you unmute yourself to make, no? Okay. So all in favor of appointing Matthew, please raise your hand. Great, thank you. I think it's great to have some folks in the DRB. Okay, the Historic Preservation Commission. Can we begin with?
I think you're missing Sue Pittiger.
Oh, no, okay. go ahead. Let's begin with a motion then again for the Development Review Board. Thank you, Claudette.
I move to appoint Susan Pittiger to the Developmental Review Board for a 3-year term expiring on April 30th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mary, seconded by Rob. So yes, so Sue is here with us. Typically we ask, Sue, is there something you would like us to know about your application?
Well, I've been serving on the Development Review Board for, it's got to be 4 years, and I've learned a tremendous amount, and I find it very interesting, and I'm very willing and able to serve. I'm just delighted that there's no fundraising in this particular slot. That's a very big plus for me. So yes, I'm happy to serve.
Yes, you do fundraising in other areas as we know.
Yeah, well, I'm running out of steam there, so.
Okay, any questions for Sue, because she's with us? No? Okay, thank you. So all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, well, thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Okay, now may I move to the Historic Preservation Commission?
You want to jump over the next?
What is the next in the motion sheet?
It's EC Fiber, and there are 2 candidates for 1 slot.
Great. So why don't we hear from the candidates first before we make the motion? Is that okay, Marcia?
Yeah, I was just going to say it's helpful to say how many people for how many slots.
That's right. So we have two slots, 2 applicants for 1 slot for this EC Fiber Review Board. Okay, so let's hear from Irv Tomei first.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
You can.
Okay. I have represented Norwich on the governing board of EC Fiber since it first formally met in April of 2008. And I would like to continue serving. I would, if you'll pardon me, a very quick summary of history for people new either to the town or to the board, the select board. EC Fiber was originally formed by about 24 towns as the East Central Vermont Community Fiber Optic Network, an interlocal contract between towns, which is a strange provision under Vermont law that nobody outside Vermont ever heard of, and very few people inside Vermont had either. We undertook, our primary mission is to make full strength broadband available to every address in our territory that's on the grid, on the electrical grid. At this point, we have about 5,600 people connected in 24 towns. We started out on a shoestring. We raised money from local folks mostly in multiples of $2,500 as unsecured promissory notes. And then in 2015, we went to the legislature and asked for passage of a new piece of law. It's chapter 82 of Title 30, and it defines a structure called a Communication Union District. A CUD is similar to a solid waste or a water district, except that it is not supported from property taxes. It has no taxing authority, and were it to get in financial difficulty, its debts cannot come back as liens against the grand list of any of its member towns. Norwich and all the original members of the old structure joined the new structure, and it's been operating as the East Central Vermont Telecommunications District since January 1st of 2016. And most of the growth has happened since that time. I think we had just a few hundred customers when we made that transition. I know we had about 250 miles of optical fiber in service then, and we now have about 1,300 miles in service. Last spring, we added some new member towns, but we will complete construction in our present members before we start building in the new ones. The only exception to that is parts of Hartford, where downtown Hartford is very thoroughly served by Comcast and other providers. And we emphasize trying to get service to people who have none or had none until we got there. About 400 Norwich residents are currently EC Fiber customers. Strictly speaking, we are the district, or ECVTD for short, but we took over all the assets and liabilities of the former structure, including its trade name, EC Fiber. And so that's what we're generally known as. I had the privilege, I say somehow I ended up chair back in November or December of 2012, and I served as chair until last May, when I chose not to run for re-election as chair, but I still sit on the executive committee, and my successor as chair immediately asked me to continue as government relations officer. In other words, as I have been for several years, I am EC Fiber's principal volunteer citizen, unpaid citizen lobbyist to the legislature. I did play a part in getting passage of the original statute, and 2 years ago in getting passage of the broadband bill that greatly modified the rules that had delayed our construction process, often by many months, for getting poles prepared for our access. I think I'm taking too much time here. I think that what's Roger's trying to signal to me. I would like to continue as representing the town. I could not have imagined a more satisfying thing to be doing in retirement than this. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate that orientation. There are some folks who don't know the history of EC Fiber, so it's appreciated. Anyone have any questions for Irv? Go ahead, Rob.
Irv, how many hours would you say you've spent in the last month speaking to legislators?
Actually, speaking to legislators, maybe 5 to 10, but listening to their debates and taking notes and deciding what needs to be said next, I've probably put in 25 to 30 hours a week during the past month.
Thank you.
Marcia, do you have a question for
Well, I guess it's mostly for the town, the idea of having a lobbyist, that sometimes lobbyists, there has to be reporting. And I'm just wondering if we have to make any reports because we're appointing someone who's doing lobbying on behalf of the town.
I don't believe so. One, I am not lobbying on behalf of the town. I am advocating for a municipal body, the district. The district itself is a municipality under state law. And I said lobbyist, I use that term loosely. I am unpaid and I'm a citizen advocate. As I understand the laws of the state of Vermont, I am not required to register as a lobbyist in order to advocate for a municipal body before the state.
Oh, okay, thank you. Any other further questions for Irv? Okay, hold tight. We'll hear from our other applicant, who I think is here, Joshua, if that's right. Go ahead, can you please?
Yeah. Good evening, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, I definitely don't have the historical context of Urban, and certainly appreciate his work. I just applied. I'm new to Norwich, and I currently work in the industry as a project coordinator. So I design and engineering of hybrid fiber coaxial networks on a day-to-day basis, and figured I kind of see a lot of the inequalities that happen in rural areas. I design basically out of the greater Boston area, but have friends and family in Vermont that still can't get high-speed internet. And I'm just looking to contribute some of my expertise to the community-based systems that are trying to amend that inequality.
That's great. Great, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Joshua? Go ahead, Marcia.
I'm just wondering, Joshua, there'd be no conflict of interest in terms of what this municipality of EC Fiber would be doing and what your day job is?
I don't believe so. At the level at which I do my day work, it really doesn't have anything to do with sales or kind of collection of new customers. I deal on the engineering and design side.
Okay.
So I actually have an administrative question. So this position has an alternate associated with it, and that alternate we've been ably served by Rob Gear, who is also a board member, as we know, and is also on our Article 36 task force. So in light of having, I wonder if you could provide, I wonder if there's, considering that we have two applicants, one who was sort of with this project from the beginning and someone new to town who wants to get involved, a logical, we may look to put one in an alternate position. I know that we should discuss them for the applications they applied for, but Rob, I would like to hear from you a little bit on what you might think I'm suggesting.
So in general, I've been felt good about being Irv's alternate. He has had remarkably good health, and I've attended most all the meetings. He's only once or twice asked me to vote in his stead when he was chair. And I still think it's a very important entity that needs as much support as possible. If Mr. Bohar would be interested in position as alternate, I would consider withdrawing. But let's hear, yeah.
Mr. Chair, may I comment?
Yes, please go ahead, Irv.
First, Rob Gear has been a very helpful alternate.
Yes.
Second, I do want to point out that not only is EC Fiber a municipality, but that the state legislature and administration decided 2 years ago to follow the EC Fiber model, and there are now 8 or 9 other communication unit districts across the state. Almost 200 towns now belong to a CUD. But with respect to the rules, actually a town can have 2 alternates.
Aha.
I do want to caution Mr. Bonar not that the board does not get involved in technical planning. The board sets policy and does not, it is not a hands-on board. It is a policy setting board. We set overall policies and budgets and matters like that. EC Fiber, the board, does not have any employees of its own. EC Fiber, the district, has a contract with a nonprofit called ValleyNet, and they provide our implementation staff.
Okay. So my question then for our 2 applicants for this position is, will either Irv or Joshua would be open to a possible alternate position to this seat? I would like to hear from both Irv and Joshua on that.
I really would like to continue as delegate, frankly.
And Joshua, do you go
Yeah,
by?
I'm open to the possibility. It's not that large of a deal for me. Certainly, I would have a lot to learn, but I do note that I wasn't intending to actually design and engineer anything for EC Fiber. It was simply lending experience in the policy setting and looking to learn more about it. So.
And so noted. So, so I'm hearing that Irv would like to continue as delegate, that we're allowed up to 2 alternates, which I did not know. And so, and that, did I already say that Joshua was open to be an alternate? So does that, perhaps there is a motion that could come from this?
Yes. I move to appoint Irv Tomai as representative to the EC Fiber Governing Board for a 1-year term expiring on April 30th, 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Marcia.
As you know, I have been very concerned about term limits. And I think that as valuable as people have been in positions and as much experience as they have, it is really good to encourage other people to apply. So I'm thrilled that Joshua has stepped forward because, you know, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we constantly appoint the same people to the same positions, we can then turn around and say no one ever steps up because we've got a structure that never changes. So I think it's really important that we think a little more broadly and think about preserving a vibrant community of people who are willing to volunteer. So I'm very anxious to see new people in positions, and you know, Joshua could probably learn a lot from Herb, but I think Joshua deserves a chance to do, you know, to learn and to take a role.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. All in favor of appointing Irv Tomei, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm going to roll call. Mary,
Yes.
Rob,
Yes.
Claudette,
Yes.
Marcia,
Abstain.
and I'm a yes. Okay. Is there another?
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there another motion?
I move to appoint Joshua Bohar and Robert Gear as alternate representatives to the EC Fiber Governing Board for a one-year term expiring on April 30th, 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Any discussion?
Must recuse myself.
Yeah.
Right. Go ahead, Marcia.
If we are to approve an alternate sort of situation, I think it would be helpful if there could be a first alternate and a second alternate.
Okay. Would someone, I think the idea is, I don't necessarily think they function as in that way though. I think the go ahead, Claudette, were you going to make a point?
Well, right. Part of my question was going to be if we could ask Irv, what is if the towns are allowed 2 alternates?
How's it structured?
Yeah, how does it work?
Customarily, someone is listed as first alternate and someone else is listed as second alternate. At each meeting, those present from a given town, when roll is taken, the roll is taken by towns. And the quorum is the number of towns represented that night, or is based on the number of towns represented. And when the roll is being called, the set of people there who are officially delegates or alternates from a given town declare who is going to be voting in the name of that town that evening.
Okay, thank you.
There's nothing that would stop all 3 of them from going to these meetings.
Oh, no, all 3 can come. All 3 can participate in discussion. That there are some towns which have very active delegations and other towns where we never hear more than one person there. I do want to mention that the statute itself defining CUDs says that people must be reappointed annually, but may be reappointed without limit. That's what the statute says.
Okay. So I feel comfortable with the motion as stands. Does anyone would like to retract or amend their motion?
Did you define a primary and a secondary?
We didn't.
did not.
We were our motion was appointing 2 alternates. So
Is that going to work, Irv, do you think?
It would be, I think it would be desirable to designate one person as principal alternate and the other as second alternate. First alternate, second alternate, terminology like such as that.
would someone like to amend or remove the motion? Mary made the.
I could amend it. I'm not sure what order to do it in, except that
You can make me second.
you don't mind being second. And Joshua, do you mind being first? Would you like to be? Is he still there?
I do not mind. And yes,
Okay.
I am. That's fine.
All right, so I amend my motion to appoint Joshua Bohar as first alternate representative and Robert Gere as second alternate representative to the EC Fiber Governing Board for a
Okay.
one-year term expiring on April 30th, 2022.
Is there a second to that amendment?
Second.
Okay, great. Any further discussion with thanks to Marcia and for that clarity? Go ahead, Marcia.
I would just say I would encourage Joshua to go to as many meetings as possible.
Okay. Absolutely. All right. All in favor? Please raise
You
your
have
hand.
to roll call it or not?
No,
Okay,
well, I think I do because of, okay.
because Rob has to abstain.
So, Mary,
Yes,
Claudette, how do you vote?
Yes.
Gear, how do you vote?
Abstain.
Okay. Marcia, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
okay.
Okay. Great.
Congratulations, Joshua.
Yes,
Yes, welcome.
thanks for stepping up.
Okay, so I'm very cognizant of time, so let's move forward as efficiently and as responsibly as possible. So the Historic Preservation Commission is next. Can I get a motion, please?
I move to appoint Nancy Osgood to the Historic Preservation Commission for a 3-year term expiring on April 30th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? I see Nancy here.
I'm confused.
Yes, Marcia, what's your, go ahead.
There's two people apparently. Are there two positions or one position?
There are two positions and 2 applicants, is my understanding.
Can we just make that clear when we start these?
Sure, absolutely. I'm being cognizant of time, so I'm rushing more than I should, but thank you. Go ahead. So Nancy, is there anything that you would like us to know about your application with thanks for your application?
Well, as you know, this is a reappointment. I've already served 2 3-year terms, but to your point, Marcia, there's been a fair number of new members on the Historic Preservation Commission, and the other applicant is new and young. Being on the commission certainly, joins my love of Norwich history and interest in it, along with historic preservation of a wonderful landscape and buildings. We're working on barns at the moment, and many wonderful sentinels on the landscape that we are documenting as best we can. So I would very much like to serve for another 3-year term, and hope that you will appoint me.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Do board members have any questions for Nancy? Okay.
Thanks for stepping up.
That's right.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Okay. All in favor, please raise your hand. Great. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Roger.
Can I get another motion, please?
I move to appoint Maggie Boone to the Historic Preservation Commission for a 3-year term expiring on April 30th, 2024.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Mary, seconded by Rob. Any discussion on this applicant? I note that Nancy gave a very positive recommendation in her earlier, so that is that for sure. Okay.
Is she here?
I believe actually she had a conflict, now that I recall. Miranda received that correspondence and let me know, and Miranda's nodding. So she does send her apologies. She had a conflict. Any further discussion, or can I call the question?
So I call the question.
Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, great, thank you. Let's move to the Planning Commission. There are 2 applicants for 1 position. So let's hear first from Jackie Allen.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. My name is Jackie Allen, and I've been serving on the Planning Commission for 6 years. I completed a partial term and then 1 full term. And I would like to serve for 1 more term is the reason I'm here tonight. I have experience writing the last 2 town plans, and I look forward to following through on the actions in that plan. I feel that these last few years have been extremely helpful in learning how to work together. It is not perfect, as has been observed here already tonight. But I feel that I can add something to the group and would like to continue to do so.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. Does anyone have any questions for our applicant? Okay. Brian Loeb, you have your hand up. Would you like to make a public comment?
Yeah, is that okay, Mr. Chair?
Sure. I don't see why we can't take public comments. Go ahead.
Great. Yep, I'm Brian Loeb. I serve with Jackie on the Planning Commission. I just want to make a few quick points in support of her reapplication to the commission, and thanks for your time. First, as was kind of, I guess, discussed a bit earlier, if you only tune in to the Planning Commission when there are things that kind of make the headlines, you miss what a group of truly dedicated, hardworking, caring folks are there in that group, and Jackie is right there amongst them and amongst us. She's not just well liked, but well respected by her fellow planning commissioners. She encourages wide participation by the rest of us. She's not just interested in hearing her own voice. Along with that, she's genuinely open to learning new information and about new topics. And she tries her best to make decisions and encourage us all to make decisions based on evidence. One thing I want to mention especially is she's really, really, really willing to put in the work in between meetings. It's not like she just shows up, even now when she's not chair. She brings value to each and every meeting from the work that she takes on between the meetings. And it's really a service to us as a group and to the work that we're able to accomplish during the meetings. To that point, she really cares that the commission does good work on behalf of you, the select board, and the shared objectives for the town as established in the town plan, which, as she mentioned, she was instrumental in shepherding last year. I can't recommend to you strongly enough to keep her in this role. She's great even now, not as a chair, still as a leader within our group, and really look forward to continuing to work with her on the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Jackie before we move to our second applicant? Okay, I will now do that. And the next one is Lisa Close is the other applicant.
Yes. Can you see me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Should I talk?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Sorry, I can't see myself, and so I wasn't quite sure what you guys are seeing. My name, as you said, my name is Elisa Close. I grew up here and left about 40 or 50 years ago, having arrived back in town about 5 years ago. As you can see by the application, while I was away in northern Vermont, we lived in Addison County, and I was on planning and zoning boards there, also regional planning and Conservation Commission and some other things that I enjoy doing a great deal up there. When we came back here, I was involved in a pretty consuming work situation and didn't even think about looking at boards, but I retired a year ago. And so I cast about and there you were. And so I would say that the things which are important to me are predictability and consistency, and townspeople feeling like the boards that we run in town are accessible to them and responsive to them. And that was an important part of my role. I chaired those boards that I mentioned up in Addison County. And so education and commitment to those goals, it was a big part of what I and my peers did. I can't speak too much to specific things that I would work on because I don't really know a lot about Norwich right now. I'm too new back, but I've been reading a lot. I've been reading the town plan, reading the zoning and planning documents and so on, trying to inform myself. And I won't say I'm a quick study, but I am persistent. And so if you folks decide that I am worthy of a position, then I will try hard to assure that I do that job. And I look forward to serving for a 3-year term. Thank you for considering me.
Thanks so much for that introduction. That was really appreciated. Does anyone have any questions for Lisa Close? Go ahead, Claudette.
Lisa, I'm just wondering, in the towns that you worked in previously, did you have planning and zoning administrators, or was all of that planning and zoning on the shoulders of the Planning Commission?
We had an administrator. We did have a zoning administrator that worked with us. In some of the roles that I see the Norwich zoning administrator doing, but the town was not as large as Norwich. It was not quite 2,000 people. And so the job was smaller. And so maybe that's why things look different to me. But yes, we did have a zoning administrator.
That's it.
Does that answer the question?
Yep.
Yeah.
Marcia, did you have a question?
Yeah. Elisa, when you were working with the Planning Commission in the town in Addison County, did you have an opportunity to work on a town plan?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Any further questions for this applicant? Go ahead, Mary.
Melissa, did you ever work on anything relating to septic or sewer in the town where you were?
Only as it related to on-site septic. The town was not one where a town sewer plan was ever considered. That never came up.
Scale.
I'm sorry?
It was probably too small.
You're breaking up. Too small, yes.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? I'll take a public comment otherwise. Go ahead, Stuart Richards. Do you have a public comment?
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. I'd like to tie back into what Marcia said earlier, and that is to encourage new people to contribute and be a part of this town, especially where there's a not so new resident who has lived here for a number of years before. And I don't like to see people who have served, who still want to serve, leave. And so I have a suggestion, and that relates back to something that was discussed a while back, and that is to enlarge the Planning Commission by 2 members so that we could have not only Jackie, but also Lisa. I think it's important to encourage new people or old people or new old people to be a part of Norwich, and those who want to contribute and can contribute, that they get their chance. So I'd like to encourage you to really consider enlarging the Planning Commission to 9 members and to seek 1 more member. There were previously, as you recall, Doug Wilberding and also Linda Cook, who volunteered to be part of the Planning Commission. I don't know if either or both of them still would like to be, but it would be wonderful if we had some new people joining the Planning Commission. So thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you for your public comment. The only thing I would say, so Jackie is applying for a second term, just to be clear. I don't necessarily directly reply to public comment. So, but since it's brought up, I am absolutely not in favor of increasing the size of this commission. I don't believe they were effective with 9. Any other discussion or comments before I take a motion? Go ahead, Marcia.
I'm just wondering about the efficacy. Were you going to do this one by one, or are you going to ask for votes for, the 2 candidates?
Yeah, I'm going to take a motion, and the motion is
One or the other.
is the one or the other. So,
Well, I make a motion that we appoint Alyssa Close to the position on the Planning Commission.
is there a second? I am not seeing a second. Is there a second for this motion? Okay. The motion fails. Is there another motion?
In discussion again, I just do not understand how we can not be open to new people, new blood, new ideas. We just will die on the vine if we have groupthink. I know people work together. Some people work together well, and some people get used to things being the way they are. But it's a very chilling atmosphere, and I don't think we're doing ourselves any favors.
I hear you, Marcia. If you're looking to explain, if you're looking for an explanation of some thinking from board members, okay, you're making just a point. Okay.
Right. I just wish people would take it to heart and think about the long term.
Okay. Any other discussion, or is there a motion? Go ahead.
I just want to reply to Marcia.
Go ahead.
I believe that there are, the reason I did not support your motion is that I think that there are some members of the Planning Commission who work very well together, and there are others that don't. So my vote is strategic.
And similarly, since we're offering explanation, I think it's not, obviously there's 2 qualified candidates, someone who's new, and I want them to be a part of our community and serve in our community. But I think we've sort of been alluding to some some issues that might be resolved by future policies or future support, and I'm not willing to put a new person into that culture. That's all. So that's how I feel. So normally I would, I take the same seriousness that you have, but see a different direction. I will offer that. Ooh, chilling indeed. Is there a motion?
I move to appoint Jackie Allen to the Planning Commission for a 4-year term expiring April 30th, 2025.
Is there a second?
I second it.
Great. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, roll call. Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
Claudette, how do you vote?
Yes.
Marcia, how do you vote?
No.
And I'm a yes. Okay, thank you to both of our applicants. It's really your participation is really appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have a TRORC alternate. So there's one alternate in this one. Is there a motion?
I move to appoint Jeff Lubell as alternate representative to the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission for a one-year term expiring on April 30th, 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Rob Francis, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. I'd just like to explain that the reason why Jeff LaBelle can't join you tonight is that he's actually attending the Two Rivers Regional Planning Commission meeting right now, which is inconvenient for everybody, but that's what he's doing. So we had to flip a coin, and this is the way it played out. So.
Okay, and Jeff Lubell is the alternate, and we have previously appointed Rod Francis as the as our rep. So. Okay, any further discussion? Otherwise, I'll call the question. Okay, all in favor of Jeff Lubell's application? Raise your hand. Okay, thank you. And then, okay, and then we have, for the TRRC, we've had Rod serve in this position. I don't believe he necessarily filled out an application. Would board members be comfortable taking action on his as our appointment, as our regular one?
Just move that. What you're saying?
Let's make the motion and then we'll have a discussion. So yes, I will entertain a motion.
Okay, I move to appoint Rod Francis as representative to the Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission for a one-year term expiring on April 30th, 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion, including, you know, whether or not Rod should have formally applied? Any discussion? Go ahead, Marcia.
I've never been comfortable with a town employee holding this position, and especially one who doesn't even live in our town. I'm not comfortable with it at all.
Okay. Any other discussion? I will say that Rod has ably served us because we have advertised the position and we haven't necessarily had the interest or the applicants, I will say. And we have previously had wondered if Jeff Lubell would be willing to serve, not as the alternate, to which he has resoundingly said no, he wants to be the alternate.
I just have to say again, I think it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We appoint the same people, and when somebody applies from outside, they don't get appointed. So I think that's what we can expect.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Any other comments, discussion?
Roger, I don't, did you say this was not a posted position or was a posted position?
This was posted.
With no applicants?
Not to date.
Okay.
I'm looking for Miranda to nod. Not by the deadline, and she's saying no.
All right, thanks.
Any other further comments? Okay. All in favor of that appointment, please raise your hand. Rod Francis. Okay, roll call. Mary?
Yes.
Rob?
Yes.
Claudette?
Yes.
Marcia?
Abstain.
And I'm a yes. Okay.
Just quit the Article 37 people.
Yeah, I'm on it.
Right.
Can I have a combined motion on this one, please? Someone?
I move to appoint Aaron Lamperti and
Ernie
Ciccatelli to the Article 36 task force.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Mary seconded it. Okay, any discussion?
Just that they're both the selected appointees from their respective committees.
Right, they were previously
Roger, can I Roger, can I interrupt a second? There's someone that's trying to come into the meeting that been having technical problems. Can you see if you can enter them in, please?
I just entered someone in now.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to call the question. All in favor of these two appointees, please raise your hand. Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm really thankful for members of the public for hanging out with us for an hour extra over our advertised agenda item. I would normally maybe recommend a break, but I would like to actually move forward because folks have been waiting, I know. So what I would like to do for this is, Herb, I would like you to just, if you may, sort of summarize your memo for folks who, for whatever reason, haven't read it in the packet. If you could do that. And then what I'm actually going to do is take a period, 15 minutes of public comment. And then I would like to go into board discussion, if that's all right. So
Okay.
Herb, could you sort of summarize your memo for us and some of your current thinking with appreciation?
So in general, once I had learned that Chief Jennifer Frank was taking another position, I started to advertise for a police chief hiring process. There seemed to be a group of individuals in the community that wanted to go in, I'll say, go in a little bit slightly different direction. I don't think anybody said we should never hire a police chief, but that we needed to have some community engagement first with regard to overall policing issues before we went in and hired the police chief. Based on a forum at 2 weeks ago that I had concurrently agreed with the chair to hold to try to get some additional input, which I also thought would be invaluable to the survey process that I had sent out. And hearing all of those particular comments, there seemed to be consensus of the board at their last meeting to try to figure out some kind of an interim solution. So we didn't get into arguing about what was my responsibility besides what the board felt were theirs, that it would be better to just continue working proactively forward to figure out what might be a good interim solution. So I had a lot of thinking process. What I've in the process of doing is to temporarily elevate Sergeant Keeling, who's the current officer in charge, to interim police chief for a period of 1 year. That during that 1 year period, hopefully in the first 6 months, that the board, with some collaboration with me, could move forward with having the kind of community discussion, engagement, deliberation, or what have you, that right now seems to be somewhat evenly handed in terms of the comments that we've received, including the many emails that I've received today, that I think I spent about 6 hours of my time responding individually to emails. So I appreciate all of those comments. And then during that particular year, that I hope that we could wrap things up in a 6-month period of time, with the idea that sometimes it takes longer to find a person in a position, so that I would start advertising again unless I decided to elevate Sergeant Keeling to the full-time position permanently. There would be, during that period of time, essentially we would remain at our current 75% staffing. Coverage remains essentially the same during that process. The day shift is the one that really would be different, where typically there's 2 officers on duty, so the chief can do some normal administrative responsibilities. In this particular instance, we would only still have the chief on duty during that officer, or some kind of a switch at some point. We would be trying to backfill any coverage issues with perhaps some overtime, trying to get some help from some other agencies, and maybe relying on our singular part-time person to fill maybe some of those shifts. I do know that the overtime's a possibility. The possibility of our part-timer filling in is possibly there. I'm not sure yet, but the thinking that we're going to get help from the Vermont State Police or the Sheriff's Office right now is not a possibility. And that's been directly researched with both of those entities. And it's really from the function that the state is not offering contracts to local communities anymore due to their own staffing and coverage issues. And then the sheriff's department, as much as they'd like to be able to help us, they don't have the staffing right now in order to be able to offer that. Plus, I would just indicate that the amount of funds to pay the hourly wage would be used up extremely rapidly because it is expensive. I think just in what I just tried to do was to at least set some kind, instead of having a whiteboard in front of us, to basically just try to set out what I think would be involved in some of those particular community discussions. Obviously, those issues raised by the citizens, clearly staffing levels for the NPD, sworn and non-sworn personnel, and some of this is picked up on from our forum as well as the survey. Other needed positions, for instance, if we needed consultants or we needed to consider some other issues such as mental health or other health and human service agencies. Obviously, operational and capital funding needs. And then in recognition of the town manager form of government, just making sure that we have a mutual course of action that we're proceeding down. And then clearly any other issues that the select board wants to identify in this process besides those that I just mentioned above. And again, just to generally summarize, I'm looking at this as a hopefully no more than a 1-year time frame, and specifically with regard to the discussions that I hope that we could do it within a 6-month period of time at the latest. But is that enough of a summary, and if there are questions?
I think that was extremely helpful. If board members have questions of clarity, I would like to have them ask their questions of clarity now. Otherwise, I think I'm sensing that there'll be some substantial public comment, which I would like to take. And then I would come back to the board to discuss what Herb has put before us and possibly have a motion to affirm it one way or another, right? So are there questions of clarity that we would like to ask Herb now about his presentation and his memo, or go ahead, Marcia.
It's beyond the scope of that, but it is with reference to a memo or an email that Herb wrote to Charlotte Metcalf on April 26th. And in that, I think it's the first paragraph, he says, the current budget and the one for the coming year as prepared and authorized by the voters anticipates a sworn officer force of 4.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm wondering how we got from that statement, which seems to me to be mandated by the voters and which would require a change by the voters, to jumping to 75% capacity.
So the budget, basically the budget is put together based on our normal force is the 4 full-time sworn officers. And then we have a separate part of the budget that has the part-time budget and other things related to overtime and all that. So that's the budget that comes forward that's authorized by the voters, which is essentially a not to exceed amount. It plays into the bottom line. The voters vote the bottom line. They don't vote the individual line items that make up the bottom line. So when we put our best foot forward for not only department heads and the town manager's office, but the select board, we're putting forward the best budget that we think is appropriate for the voters to authorize in the March timeframe. Then when we get to the particular fiscal year, there can be we use the budget as a fairly strict guideline to go by with regard to the operations, including the police force. In a particular instance, actual numbers can be different from what was budgeted. That's not uncommon at all for any department and any line item that's out there. So this is a situation where decisions can be made throughout the course of a fiscal year that may affect what was budgeted. The bottom line is that the board technically by statute cannot exceed the bottom line. They can go over budget on any line item that's in there, but it's a function of the bottom line, and then of course offset by revenues.
Go ahead,
Marcia. So the question I really have is, did we have 4 lines? Did we have 4 people who had benefits and a job?
We budget for the number of positions that accounts for the number of employees, including part-time, the non-sworn staff, It's a part of the budget is put together as a function of the union contract and what, say, benefits and other things the contract that's mutually bargained. But again, for instance, for the last 2 years, effectively, we've been at 75% of what our staff was due to paternity, maternity, injuries, significant injuries. So it's a system that we have put together. And in that situation, the actuals are different per se than the budgeted because of the situation that we had. Just because we budget 4 doesn't mean that we're going to have 4 during the course of the year. Those are the positions that the board authorizes, and we put the budget together for that. If the board, for instance, decides throughout the course of the year that they're only going to fund 3 positions, we're going to reduce the force by a sworn officer of 1, then what will happen in the actuals is actuals will be spent according to that decision.
So did we have
the budget items that we discussed, Marcia, maybe this answers your question, is there's a police chief wage, and then there was a wage for full-time officers. There wasn't the documents that we took action on didn't have that level of itemization. Does that help address your question?
Yeah, I mean, I think about it in sort of FTEs. People, you have a position. So did we have 4 positions, or did we just have a budget and we filled it with whatever we needed?
The budget, there are particular line items, and each individual line item had a justification for it based on what was in that particular line item. Some of those line items so there's one line item specifically for the police chief. There's another line item that is based on 4 officers. Sorry, were you cutting me off, Roger?
No, I was giving a visualization of what you were saying.
Right, and I think, I guess what I would say, Marcia, is that offline, I'd be happy to go through the budget with you. It was one of the documents that I provided to you as sort of background when you first came on. And and to go through, I'm happy to get to people's talking tonight. I'd be happy to go offline and talk to you about that specific stuff.
I just wanted to know, yes or no, are there 4 lines for 4 people?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
There was wages budgeted in a police officer salary wage, and in the justifications 4 is mentioned, but not on the line item of the spreadsheet. Mary, any questions of clarity? We're in that portion because I want to move to public comments.
Yes, if we in actuality are functioning at 75% of capacity, as we are suggested that we move forward, then anything that affects that 75% might go to 50%. In other words, when we had the idea to be operating at 100%, there were contingencies, injuries and other just things that happened that acted to reduce the functionality of the force to 75%. So going into it with 75%, is that going to be further degraded?
What was your question, Mary? I didn't hear it.
Okay, well, so Herb was saying effectively over the past year or 2, we've been functioning
Yes.
at the police department at the 75% level because of, injuries or just contingencies that have happened.
Yes.
So my question is, if now we're going to say that 75% is the norm, and then something else happens to, that's a contingency for the remaining people, are we further going to degrade the availability or the functionality of the police department?
The sustainability at a 75% has its limitation, it's going to wear out. So basically what happened over the past 2 years when we were operating for the most part at 75%, you had a police chief that pulled double and triple shifts, including sleeping on the floor under her desk and in her car out in the garage of the police station to do the coverage that was necessary. With regard to the not having a police chief right now, you're relying on sworn officers that are under the contract. The contract dictates only a certain number of hours that they can be working from that standpoint. So we're still going to have the coverage, if you will, of when we normally have a body around. There is still going to be the coverage on call situation for when we normally don't have a body around. But during the day shift, the clarity is that normally when we had 2 officers on duty, we're going to continue to only have 1 officer on duty, which is since the time frame that Jennifer left. What that does is it potentially disrupts some of the chief's responsibilities, that is Sergeant Keeling in the interim position, and the ability to do what would be a full patrol officer shift. So there still will be responses to emergencies, there still be agency assist from that standpoint, but in the day shift, there's not going to be the full quality of service that I would say that we would normally provide during that shift.
Okay. Another question of clarity. Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, let's say we move forward with Herb's suggestion. We go with the interim situation. And we really do want to do a good job of answering citizen questions about public safety. What is the role? What is the policing level? What might be supported by social service agencies or other ways of dealing with it? To what extent will anybody in the police department be able to offer their insights if they're constantly working? Or will the salary, the people who are not really on salary, the regular officers, be able to offer any insight? Because otherwise, I think you might end up with kind of a one-sided discussion.
Okay.
Or at least a discussion that doesn't have a full dimension to it. So
I think I appreciate your question, and I would like to perhaps come back to it in our discussion.
Sure.
I would ask questions of clarity on Herb's proposal, but our discussion should come after public comment. So
no, I don't think so. I think this is.
I would like to do that.
You're saying it, but yes, but I'll say I disagree with your point of view, but I will be quiet.
But we have rules of procedure. If folks want to overrule me, we can do that. But otherwise, I would like to
Go
move.
ahead. I've said what I wanted to say, so just go
And
ahead.
I promise we will come back to it because it's a good point and I appreciate it. But folks have been with us, and I want to respect their time as much as ours. So I'm going to now take some public comments for a little bit. Okay. Linda Cook, you were first, followed by Paul Magniela and Stuart Richards. Go ahead, Linda.
Linda Cook, 147 River Road. I just want to clarify a couple of points that Herb said that we had a chief sleeping under a desk or in cars or whatever. The chief being a salaried position, was the chief paid any additional compensation for the hours of overtime? Otherwise, if no, there's no reflection of the hours that were not covered by a paid employee. And I'd like to know what that number is. Number 2, is the OIC expected to do the same commitment, which I believe the OIC, and correct me if I'm wrong, Herb, is an hourly paid position, or is it a salaried paid position?
So I'm going to write down your questions, Linda, so that way we can address them in our discussion, but I don't want to keep the flow. Okay. Do you have any, but go ahead, continue with your comment unless you have finished it.
No, those were the 2 questions I'd like clarity on, please.
Okay, thank you. Paul Magniello, you are next.
Hi, good evening. Paul Manganello, 226 Turnpike Road, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to kind of address the select board. I really appreciate Herb's decision to kind of have an interim, because I think it's really important that we kind of understand what the need for policing is in our town. I can certainly, from the listserv, can appreciate the individuals who are concerned about, invasion of their personal space and, concerned about their personal safety. But this only exemplifies the fact that I think the police are being utilized in the wrong fashion. If you look at the 911 calls, and I don't have the exact number, but one of the residents had posted it, the majority of the calls are not because of violent or break-ins or burglaries. And so the police response to these more violent types of crimes that are committed in the town are diminished because of all the other stuff that they're being called for, either looking for a cat or some kind of mental health issue. And so it's really important that we get down into the details and to find out exactly what the police are being called for, and then allocating them to the right type of what their rightful position is. So this is not an issue of safety. This is an issue of rationality. And what should the police be doing, what the police should not be doing? Because when they are not doing something that's in their purview, then their time is being wasted, our money is being wasted, and the more significant calls are not being made or not being responded to. So that is an issue that I think the town needs to kind of address. Public safety and what are the police supposed to be doing? So I'm going off. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you, Paul Magniello. Stuart Richards, you are next.
I'd like to respond to what Paul was saying, because I think he makes a good point. But in order to respond, I'd like a minute and allow somebody else to speak before I do, because what I want to do is pull the town report. I should have said Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street, but I'm sorry, I forgot.
And this is your time, which I would like to give 2 to 3 minutes to. So please use it. Go ahead.
Well, would you mind allowing Deborah Hannum to speak and come back to me for whatever time I have left?
Maybe I can help him. Are you looking for the statistics?
Correct.
They're on the page 22-22. It's whatever that is. Maybe it's an addendum, but it's Roman numeral 222.
So, we don't live in Portland. We don't live in Kenosha. We don't live in Seattle. We live in Norwich, and certainly there is, and it's a function of what's going on nationally. There's an underappreciation, I think, for what the police do. And we've been most fortunate for the last 14 years to have had 2 exemplary chiefs. We had Doug Robinson, and then we had the just recently departed Jennifer Frank. And apart from owing them a great deal of thanks for what they've done, I think the reason that we have such a good record here in Norwich is at least partly and probably mainly attributable to the fact that they've done such a good job. But when you look at the actual statistics and you look at things like medical response, there are 51 of those cases. When you look at citizen assistance, 99 different statistics for that category. Trespassing, 59 statistics. DUI arrests for domestic disturbances, 12. Now, I don't necessarily want to minimize the function that social workers and or psychiatric people could have, and I don't want to minimize the fact that they could be very helpful, but that's a separate budget. That's a separate thing. When you call a policeman, I think you should be entitled to and expect the policeman to do what they're trained to do. And hopefully that's what they do in Norwich. When you have a situation where there's threatening and harassment, and I see those listed here as 11, there's just a huge amount of work that they do that is actually needed. I think it's a huge mistake to postpone having full coverage. I think there's no reason why we can't have a chief and also have any discussion that might be needed. I think that just makes a lot of sense, because the chief that is going to be hired, hopefully, the chief who's going to be hired should be a part of the discussion as to what the community really wants. And, seeing and having heard the instances where people were broken into and perhaps lives were threatened, those are things that need to be done properly. They need to be done by the police. And we do need the protection of the police, maybe not to the extent that we've seen in other parts of the country, but I do believe that they're very important.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Stuart.
Thanks, I appreciate it. I hope you go back to having a full police force and that you include the police chief, future police chief, in the discussion rather than the way that's being proposed. Thanks again.
Thank you for your public comment. And thank you, Marcia, for the assist. Deborah, you are next.
Hi, it's Debbie Hannum. I just want to say I completely agree with what Stuart has just said. I personally hate being public about what goes on in my life, in my house, but this is so important to me. I spoke at the last meeting. I've seen the memo. I've seen the suggestion and proposal. I don't know if it's a fait accompli or not. But as someone, as I said the last time, I live in Norwich. Yes, my house is quite remote. My driveway is 0.8 of a mile long, so it can take up to 3 or 4 minutes to get up my driveway. But last year, August 19th, 2 guys with ski masks and an axe walked into my house in the middle of the day with people at home. Now, I don't care what they took. I care about the threatening. I mean, it's just a miracle that my son didn't bump into them on the stairs. They missed each other by seconds. And he saw them, they didn't see him. He got out of the house, he called the police, and the police were there quickly enough so that one guy had to jump out my bedroom window, which was a 20-foot drop. He hurt his ankle. Officer Pregent gave chase, could not catch him. But, you know, at least he got fingerprints. He has an axe. And it's still 7.5 months later. Those fingerprints haven't even been run yet. Now, I know that is because of the lab, but had there been a full complement of police officers on the force, and Jennifer Frank has told me she did not have at all, ever, a full complement due to various reasons. You know, maybe my case would have been investigated more thoroughly, and there would have been more time to put pressure on the lab. But there are 2 people of interest out there with names, they're suspects, but we can't go after them. And they could go and do it to someone else. We can't go with 75% capacity. It's just not safe. And it's not certainly, you know, why I live in this town. I've been here for over 20 years as a part-time resident, paid full taxes all that time. And now I live here full time and I can't feel safe. And that to me just seems really not right. And I feel that this interim solution is one that jeopardizes all our safety because it sends a message to would-be perpetrators like the ones who walked into my house wearing ski masks and carrying an axe. It says Norwich is a sitting duck, we're a soft target. They know that the police are going to take a half an hour, 45 minutes to get there. You know, they have all the time in the world to get what they want. And they're going to know it. And anyway, so I feel personally very threatened, and I suspect others do as well.
Thank you. Thank you for your public comment. I appreciate it. Next is Al-Kadev.
Hi, good evening. It's Al-Kadev, 175 New Boston Road. This is my first time attending a select board meeting. And I have actually been here since the very beginning because I wanted to see a little bit more of how select board runs things. I've lived in Norwich for about 5 years. Before this, I lived in New York City for 15 years, and I've had more encounters with the police on the streets of Norwich than in New York City, ever. One was on my bike, with not a car in sight. I was pulled over. In fact, the police car pulling me over scared me way more than anything I was doing because it just came out of nowhere for not making a full stop at a stop sign. Once I was pulled over by Chief Frank for not having cleared the snow off my car properly. Once I was pulled over on Thanksgiving Day, I was driving home with a bunch of groceries in the evening. And I think I was going like 30 and 25. And I was pulled over with groceries in my car, my son in the car with me. It took about 20 minutes to run everything. So just to say that I would love it if all of the officers who are, watching out for my safety in this time were actually working on something as serious as the break-in we just heard about. But in my opinion, I'm a public health researcher, and we are always researching, talking about stress and the impact of stress on people's health and on people's long-term health outcomes. And these encounters left me really shaken, because I felt like in this small little town, I can't even ride my bike in the middle of the day, where I can see for miles that there's no car coming. And then I don't know where the police car came out of, but there it was. So there's partly that, and partly I was struck by how at the onset of the pandemic last year, there were so many blue lights on Main Street. And I thought, really, like, of all the things in this town, what we need right now is police on Main Street pulling people over. I don't know for what. So just this idea of like this ongoing kind of tension and stress that one has to experience for doing the most basic day-to-day things. And to, I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe when I drive down Main Street, because I don't know what I'm doing wrong always, that I'm going to be pulled over for. So I think that I think I would love to hear more actually about the interim period, not so much in terms of what we don't have, but in terms of what are we actually going to do to take full advantage of that interim period, to learn about what we need in terms of safety and security and a healthy community.
Thank you. Any further public comments? Go ahead, Jennifer.
There we go, finally. So Jennifer Roby, 380 Main Street. It is really great to be able to have this kind of conversation and to know that there's this interim period. I really hope that we can take time to reflect and I would really like to understand what is the level of policing that is really needed, to know that we've been at 75% capacity, I guess is the word, is very interesting to me. I didn't notice any change. I didn't notice feeling less safe as a result. So I guess I also just want to say I want to work in some kind of solidarity with what is happening around the country. It is very important to me that we're aware of what the experience of being over-policed is like. I think that's really important. So thank you for this conversation. I look forward to being involved. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further public comments? Okay, I'm going to count to 6 in my head and then we'll move to board discussion. Okay. Thanks so much to folks for their comments. And then, so there are 3 questions that were asked what is the, like, what was, so I'll turn to Herb to answer Linda Cook's questions. What was the chief's compensation during the period, during the last year for moments where they had to fill in? And is the interim expected to make the same commitment? And is that an hourly wage or salary? So Herb, could you address those to the extent that you wish to, or that is possible?
Yeah, there was some, so basically the chief is a salaried position, but we do have some on-call coverage that as a, for instance, Jennifer, when she did all those particular hours, she had some on-call coverage that she got, but it doesn't approach what, it was a good chunk of change, but it doesn't approach what would be if there was another officer on duty from that standpoint working overtime. with regard to Sergeant Keeling being elevated to a interim chief position, he is a union employee currently. I'm currently working with the union to work out any of those particular details. Every position in the police department is an hourly wage besides the police chief. And so I can't fully answer Linda's question without I'm right literally in the middle of talking to the union about those kinds of issues. But essentially the true value is the elevation to the police chief position, because you have to have a department with a police chief in it in order to do some of the things that they have to do. For instance, I can't even have an ID put together without having a police chief on board because of at a state level situation. So there are some minimum standards that have to be met, so to speak, in order to do that. I think that Sergeant Keeling has been mentored by Jennifer Frank for a lot of information with regard to what needs to occur in that particular position. I'm sure he's capable of handling the position during the interim period of time. But I also know as a higher command that he's held before that, there's clearly some learning along the way, but I do know that Jennifer does have a fairly regular conversation with him about where things are, where things were left off, so that he's got some good mentoring, but he also has a lot of experience in serving locally, not only with Norwich, but also in the Hartford area.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any board members, any board member discussion about Herb's proposal for us? And Mary, go ahead. And I have not forgotten that you asked, how can the department be part of the discussion? But go ahead, you're on mute.
Yes, that's what I was going to have you ask Herb.
Sure. How do you foresee the department potentially being part of the community conversation on policing and the police chief?
I think similarly with my perspective that originally and still is hold close to heart is that I do think the police chief needs to be part of this particular discussion in trying to find an interim solution to different perspectives. I do believe that Sergeant Keeling as interim chief needs to be engaged in these discussions and needs to be welcomed into these discussions. And I think that any other police officer, sworn or not sworn, would be welcome to participate in these particular efforts. Whether that's not in COVID, but kind of a tour of the facility to see what they typically do, to have them here to kind of provide perspective, or be asked to be part, but allow them to audit the process. But I would hope that you would allow them to at least express, what is it like to be in the day of, what's the day of an officer, a normal patrol officer or a sergeant from that standpoint, how they feel that they can retain the Norwich image, if you will, small town. I think that in general, a police force for the most part that's respected, but a small one. And then also their understanding of where they see the national discussion going, or how they feel that they're impacted by the national discussion in their current situation. Potentially also how they feel that their department might be able to change in some person's perspective for the better, or to address some of these national issues. Everybody needs to be part of the discussion.
Well, right, and there's certainly a lot of questions around statistics that I think could be answered, and then we had a September sort of effective date for our policy that required the department to post their policies or their key department directives, I believe is what we landed on. And so that's another way that the department can inform the community more about what they do. They could follow that policy as we unanimously passed, I will say. Marcia, did you have a comment? And then back to...
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that, you know, we have a social contract here where people expect certain things. And that's not the same thing from the public point of view, but we owe the public, all of them, and the obligation to make sure that they feel safe, whether that's from a person coming in with an axe or being stopped for not a really potentially visibly good reason. I think that in terms of competing harms, maintaining the status quo in terms of size is not endangering necessarily or changing what's going on in our town. But I think it behooves us to make sure that people on the outskirts of town and even on the inside, you know, the closer to town, feel safe and secure in their homes as well as on the street. And I think we do need enough protection, and we owe the public that amount of protection. I started looking around for statistics. I looked at the numbers that are in the town report, but also the statute refers to if there's any change in the police department, it has to be reported, well, in terms of creating or eliminating the police department, has to be reported to the Vermont Criminal Justice Council. So I looked at that council, and they have fascinating statistics about traffic stops for towns. And for Norwich, they reported for 2020 or 2019, 4,186 traffic stops. Now that seems like a lot to me, but just looking, and it's broken down, sliced and diced very nicely, so anyone can see exactly what happened and who, you know, some statistics about the type of people and the age of people and all sorts. But it seems to me that a lot of that is mechanical sort of stuff that can be easily replaced by electronic things that monitor speed and take officer time away. So what I'm saying is, I think that primarily we need to ensure before we do anything significantly different or has a perception of being significantly different, we need to make sure that people feel safe in their homes and on the street. But I'm not sure that reducing the body of people that is understood to be our police force is going to get us there. I think rather we should maintain the status quo and move expeditiously towards looking at what we want to do in the future, but not the distant future.
Thank you. Mary has her hand up next, and then Rob looks like he's putting his hand up. Go ahead, Mary.
I agree with Marcia, and I still am wondering if we are at 75%, if we wouldn't be, you know, if something happens, if we wouldn't quickly go down to 50%. So that was another thing I wanted to ask Herb. You don't have to answer it now. It's just a question. So.
Right. And I think too, I think, you know, 75%, 50%, 100%, you know, 100 traffic stops, 800 traffic stops. I think we need to, I think as Marcia was sort of alluding to, like, you know, and I apologize, I'm interrupting. We need to understand how that relates to the lived experience and also standing operating procedures. I have no understanding what 75% means because I don't understand what 100% coverage means and why it was decided that standard operating procedures needed to be determined at the level it is determined, right?
Yes, it's a complex subject. So just throwing a percentage out doesn't reveal the complexity. But I think probably what it does reveal is just number of hours. And how those hours are spent is extremely important and should be a matter of discussion going forward.
Right.
But I do agree with Marcia that I don't think we should start with fewer hours. I think we should have better, at least as a base point.
Okay, and I'm interrupting just for clarity. Like I appreciate that point, but are you speaking? How does that relate to sort of the proposal, which is actually a little bit more of the agenda item that we're discussing tonight? Because Herb talked about he talked about ways to address
Herb's interim solution proposes basically that we kind of freeze the police department in the configuration that it has and try to see if, you know, Sergeant Keeling can fill the police chief role for a while we figure things out. So I think that's how I understand it. I don't feel comfortable with that. I would rather that we just went forward and hired a police chief who has the training, the leadership, and kind of builds a force back up to what it has been. And hopefully without the injuries and other, I think, stressors that led to our former chief sleeping under the desk or in her car. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's my thinking.
Okay, Rob, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I had a question for Herb. Will the interim officer, as he becomes the interim department head, will he have the same authority and responsibility that a permanent department head would have?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if he were to perceive that it was seriously debilitating to have that small a force working, he would be paid attention, just like any department head who's saying we're understaffed and we have to get somebody new to add and fill in the time, especially if that is budgeted already to accommodate that extra person. I mean, I'm not saying that it's an automatic hire if they decide that it's necessary, but is the attitude possibly going to be, oh, you're just the interim guy, don't, you know, we don't pay quite as much attention to you.
You want me answering that, Mr. Chairman?
If there was a question to answer.
Well, the question is, yeah, would that interim department head have, again, the same authority and responsibility and influence that a permanent department head would have?
So essentially, yes, that person carries the same weight. To respond a little bit to what you're talking about, the elevation of the sergeant to the police chief position is basically temporary, assuming he doesn't get the permanent position. Mm-hmm. He would be guaranteed his sergeant position upon, you know, if we decided to move forward, if I decided to move forward, you know, we all decide to move forward and get a police chief that ultimately doesn't result in Sergeant Keeling sitting in that particular position. He would return to that particular standpoint. The question that still is out there is that does he retain his union rights during that interim period of time? He will have the full rights of the chief from that standpoint, because I have to have a chief. But with regard to some of the queries there, what plays into it is that there are a number of union positions and there are a number of positions that you authorize as a board. I cannot simply, in my mind today, because there's a quote unquote vacancy out there, the vacancy technically is the chief position. By elevating somebody into that position temporarily, to me, that does not mean that there's a vacant patrol position out there, because that then has to come back to you to say, do we need 5 positions in town instead of 4? That's the difference that comes in here, and the caution that I throw to the wind with regard to that 75% situation. So there's a level of complexity to what I believe is a simple question, but in terms of actuality as it plays out with regard to the union, to the select board in terms of what they've authorized and what I can do, because it's not simple to say, well, during the year, can't we just find somebody to fill in on a full-time basis? I can't even find people for a full-time position to fill that position. As a, for instance, it's too difficult to think that there's somebody out there that's I'm not saying it's not worth a shot, but I'll guarantee you it's a big no that there's no one going to be out there willing to fill just a position for 1 year on a full-time basis. That's the real concern that I have, that partially plays into that 75% issue.
it seems to me that the idea of hiring another person for the force during this period would be fraught with union problems if it was decided to reduce the force level at that point afterwards. So
I think clearly the union would work with us in this particular instance. It's just there's more to the discussion than just trying to backfill for a period of time or what have you. That's I don't want to throw disregard at the union. I think they understand exactly what's going on and would be willing to work with us, but they're also going to be, you know, making sure that there's no unfair labor practice.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I haven't heard from Claudette, but I see Marcia, your hand is up.
Claudette?
Yeah, this is, I would almost say this is a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. And part of me is thinking that what the police force has been doing is going to be restricted based on them having one fewer position if we go this interim route. And I believe they would have the sense to not fill those or not perform those things that are not public safety issues. And I think that if we collectively as a town consider the flashing speed lights, which have been discussed previously, investigate the cameras for traffic control, that the officers will be then available to respond to those more serious issues while we as a town look to see what we collectively want our police force to be doing. When people read off these statistics, 11 of this per year, well, that's an average of one every however many days. And it's unfortunate for the person that is experiencing that, but I don't believe if we looked at statistics over time that we're going to be significantly impacted, because we haven't been in the last couple of years that Herb has said we haven't had a full complement of officers anyway.
So I want to do one before Marcia, I take your comment. I just want to say, it sounds like what I'm hearing from the board is that there needs to be a community-led component. There needs to be a continued conversation about the vision and the needs and the current activities of the police department. I'm hearing, and the scope of that would, to be defined by the board with, considerable public input. But what I am hearing from everyone is there isn't any opposition to that idea. Is that, can I get some nods or something? Like, generally there is a belief that, we should be looking more closely at policing related issues in this department.
Yes.
Go ahead, Marcia. You don't want to immediately nod, which I respect. Go ahead.
Yeah, generally, yes, I agree with that, except that I think we'd be abrogating our responsibilities if we weren't a key component of that.
Yes, absolutely.
So I don't think it's incorrect to say it would be, in my view, a community-led thing. It's, we're all in this together, but we're the bottom line responsible to make sure everybody's safe.
I'm nodding to that, and I think others would be. Okay. Okay, so
That was my comment, but I agree with you.
great, thank you. And then, so I want to take your comment and then I want to do another framing question. Go ahead, Marcia.
It just seems to me that potentially the solution of raising one of the existing officers to an interim chief and hiring another person so that we have what people thought what we had 100% might be more convoluted than if we proceeded as intended originally, that Herb was going to process a search, hire a chief, and then we would ostensibly have 4 people in police uniforms, sworn officers. And at that point, we could then say, you know, with full disclosure, when we hire somebody as a police chief, at that point, we can say, you know, now we've looked at this as a community and we don't want to have X, Y, or Z. And so our police force is going to change in this way. Whether that means then that we're going to have 1 less officer or not, but it would seem more straightforward to go forward and hire the new police chief and then start quickly analyzing if we've done the right thing, rather than this machination of which I can see might have some ramifications in terms of unions or whatever. Is that clear?
Yes, yes, yes. Inherently, you feel like there is potentially more liability forthcoming.
Well, I think it's more convoluted to elevate someone on an interim level, hire another officer, and then maybe, you know, change the force again.
But that's not what's being proposed. That's not what Herb has proposed. Just to be clear, right, Herb? So you have proposed an interim chief, and then you have suggested that with a part-time, using the part-time salary line, relying on mutual aid networks, that there would be other ideas to fill in this 25%, whatever that may mean, gap.
I've tried to propose something that the message that I got at the last meeting from the board was if there was a possibility of doing an interim type of a solution, that seemed to be the way to go, because my original position was to hire a police chief and then have the discussion with the community so that the police chief is part of that discussion and can adapt accordingly. So what I've tried to do in putting my position together is, yes, exactly, to have an interim. I really don't, I would try to backfill the vacant position with some overtime, possibly with some agency assist. That seems to have died away with the state police and the sheriff's department. But also try to rely on our other part-timer, our singular part-timer, to see if there's a couple extra shifts that he could fill. So we try to have as little lack of coverage as possible, especially during that day shift.
Right.
So that's yes. So in general, that's what my memo spells out.
And to go back to that memo, which is what we're discussing ultimately, if I may, is that you've suggested an interim hire for a year, but you have said that, you know, the board has 6 months to lead their investigation, whether it be community-led or a significant aspect of public input. There's a 6-month timeline. And so that, and, you know, the conversation would need to be sort of neatly wrapped up in that time so you can begin to make a decision for the future of this department one way or another. So there's a year appointment, but it's imagined to be that this conversation cannot go past 6 months. Is that what I also understand from your memo?
It can go past 6 months, but I would prefer that it be wrapped up by then, because I am nervous about hiring police officers just due to the scarcity of availability of them throughout the country. So I want to have time as well to conduct an adequate hiring process, you know, if you're going to have this community discussion first.
Right. And so there are guardrails built into your proposal.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Mary. I just wanted to be clear about the content of the memo. Go ahead, Mary.
I feel very confident about that I know what Herb's recommendation is, but I agree with Marcia. I think it's backwards. So if I had any influence over this, I would run it the way Marcia has suggested.
Okay. Any further discussion? Because I want to wrap this agenda item up. Go ahead, Claudette.
My one concern there is that the union, truthfully, and that if we hire a new chief, for example, that chief is not subject to the union contract. The officers are. And we have no easy way to then say if the agreement is to reduce the force to a chief and two full-time officers, that leaves one officer that we can't, yeah, we could get rid of, but we probably would need to hire to continue to pay based on the union contract.
Well,
so it's, I guess that union piece to me is, and I know we have a reduction in force piece in the contract, which I can't actually recall what it says.
You can basically do a reduction. If you guys opt to reduce a position that affects the union, you can do a reduction in force. Essentially, it's a reduction in force by opposite seniority. So last in, first out.
Yeah, and that wouldn't be fair actually to the police force either.
And I appreciate that point, Claudette, but that is not what we were discussing this evening. Ultimately, I think we are discussing whether or not we believe an interim solution is necessary or appropriate, or what we want to affirm in order to have the sort of the conversations that envisioning of the department. So we're basically the proposal, as I understand it, is that it's 6 months of study, and then there may be what you're talking about at the end of that study, depending on how we frame it, but or what is revealed. But that's not what we're necessarily talking about, and I think that's actually a big misunderstanding. I think in not that you have created, but I think people are speaking from this place of you're making a decision to reduce the force in perpetuity. And what
I was responding to Mary and Marcia's comment that they wanted to hire a chief,
right,
then have the discussion.
Oh, I see. Okay, I apologize, but I want to say, that we're not discussing. We're discussing an interim solution. We're not necessarily discussing the reduction of the force for this evening. Go ahead, Marcia.
Except that if we take the interim solution, we're effectively having a reduced force because we really can't count on the backfill situation. I mean, I find that a little disconcerting.
I mean, it was also, I will say, I appreciated Claudette's point where she said we may or may not have been operating at this level for a long time for a host of different reasons. And so, do we choose to operate that way now because of concerns brought by the community? We didn't act that way differently when we were trying to find different kinds of coverage, right? So, to your point, like you made an earlier point about, I won't say that because it's apples and oranges, but I think but I will say that, right, that, because perhaps we won't see a difference in the on the ground experience. Is there a motion that is expected from this, or do we to affirm this recommendation, or is this continues to be additional insights that we're offering Herb? That's a question to the group.
Well, I would move that the town manager hire a full-time police chief.
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made. There's a second. Any discussion?
I mean, again, I think that if we do that, maybe there's just full disclosure that this could be a very different department in a year. And then I think it's on the table, but we just go forward.
I think perhaps Marcia and I, are the most behind this. But if the others aren't, it also clears the air if this goes down. Then we are actually, I think, have agreed as a board that we have to sort of graciously move on with this interim solution. So I would just like to know how people stand.
Your motion is the opposition of the current recommendation from Herb.
Well, it's to hire a full-time police chief, not to have an interim solution, but to move forward with hiring a chief now.
That is so.
Which is consistent with his first position.
Any further discussion?
Yeah. One of the questions would be, Detective or Officer Keeling, I don't know what the title is currently serving as interim head of the department, correct? Police chief?
He's officer.
Serving as officer in charge.
Officer in charge, okay. So, and effectively, that's working out to be a good chain of command?
In my opinion, he's qualified for the position, yes.
Okay. What I was just concerned about is making sure that we have a police chief or someone who is responsible for directing the force now. And if that meant hiring him on an interim basis for the year or offering him that position as an interim position for a year, I'm okay with that. But I think that it's absolutely necessary that some aspect of that be filled immediately, which apparently he's doing. And I'm concerned that Norwich has had some difficulty hiring people in positions of authority.
Yeah, the only thing I will say before I call the question, unless there's any more discussion, thank you, Rob, is I think it's a real lost opportunity to not engage in not only the question of what is the vision we would like to relay to a future hire, but instead to also think about more broadly about what actually public safety means, how does it intersect with public health, what is the lens of equity, all of these things have been unresolved as you go into making a hire. And I find that to be disappointing. And I understand that people, some board members have communicated some concerns about certain complexities and liabilities, but I think it is important to weigh the harms, the potential harms, and the potential community trust. And so I actually appreciate the town manager's recommendation, and I actually think it goes against some of his best practices as a town manager of what he sort of might immediately rely on to make a recommendation. And so I applaud it. And it was, Norwich is not exceptional on policing or anything else. It is unique in particular. And I thought that this was a unique and particular recommendation at a unprecedented cultural moment. And so that is what I would like to say. So thank you, Herb, for your recommendation, regardless of what we do with it. But I think, ironically, we didn't want to have a conversation about statute and authority, and this, depending on this motion, might necessitate that conversation. But I don't want it to. So in the spirit of what Mary was saying. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Marcia.
I just want the caveat that I don't understand it to be the same way that you just expressed, that this would be obviating any discussion. I think that this is only one way of getting through until we have that discussion. I agree with you that that is a crucial thing that has to happen, because obviously we're at a melting point in this country. At this moment, we're lucky in this town. We're not having those, you know, egregious things happen, but we are having some things happen to people which are equally egregious in their own way. And so I don't want to go forward on this one way or the other and have anybody think that we don't want to have that discussion, especially you, Roger. I think that this is key. We have to do it.
Right. Well, I won't say right. I'll say thank you. Yes, thank you, Marcia.
I agree with Marcia.
Okay, so I'm going to call the question, which is to not affirm Herb's recommendation.
The motion was to hire a full-time police chief.
Right, okay. So all in favor to hire a full-time police chief, please raise your hand. Okay. All opposed, please raise your hand.
You're not going to roll call it?
I can roll call it. Mary, how do you vote?
Yes.
Marcia, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob, how do you vote?
No.
Claudette, how do you vote?
No.
And I'm a no.
Okay. Thank you for that.
That
helps my thinking.
Yes, and I think that this was difficult for me to chair, and I actually, this is conversation and full disclosure.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate Marcia's comment just now. I really appreciate Mary putting it to a vote and saying we will respect that, and that the conversations are not going to get easier. They're going to get more difficult, and it is our responsibility to understand that there are not camps and that there's a complexity of issues that we will undertake because we need to be committed to the situation.
Yeah, and I think we needed that vote to, in my mind, to be able to do that, because I had to get that behind me in order to move forward. So I appreciate us taking that vote.
And I think we also appreciate the public. I think the members of the public who came forward put forth a lot of different knowledge claims. Some of their knowledge claims that they put forward put them in potentially vulnerable or
places.
Positions. Yes. I really respect that, and I'm thankful for them for showing up, and we're committed to them. So anyone else would like to add anything to my perhaps unnecessary chorus? But no, a very important chorus. Go ahead, Marcia.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just for people's peace of mind,
Mm-hmm.
Is it true that we will be looking to have, it's not really a 75% reduction? Is that true?
The number of sworn officers is currently at 75%. We have 3 sworn officers full-time. We have one part-timer that fills in once in a while for shifts. So we have a vacancy in the police chief position as it stands. There's a person that's technically coming out of one of the union positions to be elevated to interim chief. That still keeps, so we normally have 4 FTEs. We are absent 1.
But we'll be looking for backfill.
I am not guaranteeing that will be backfilled. That's the whole point of my memo.
I know, but we're looking for it.
I definitely, if there are union folks that would like, I have to look to the union first. So if there's some backfill, there's some overtime that I would have to pay to do that. And then other options beyond that being the right of first refusal, so to speak, will be trying to find, say, other agencies and our part-timer to help backfill that. It seems like state police is saying no. It seems like the county sheriff is unable to do it at this point. I have yet to have conversation with our part-timer. I don't know if Sergeant Keeling has initiated that discussion. He may have, because he's been already trying to move things forward as best as he can. And then if we did have a part-time, if we can find a new part-timer that is willing to be in this area and fill some shifts, that is a possible option that we have, because we have a general budget for part-time help. But we did lose a part-timer with Jennifer moving to Windsor.
How do we lose a part-timer with Jennifer Frank?
Because he only filled in like one shift every other week on a Sunday, and he basically didn't want to work anywhere but where Jennifer was, frankly.
Okay, interesting. Okay, Mary, do you have go ahead?
Yes, I do think the community discussion about public safety policing is really important. So I'm just wondering if we want to have it as on the next agenda.
So I have a sort of request for board member homework, if you will, but I want to hear from Rob and see when we'll talk about that. Go ahead, Rob.
So I just want to make it clear that the board has acted to essentially tell her your plan at the moment is good.
Yes.
And go with it.
Yes, we have affirmed Herb's recommendation as outlined in his memo in the April 20th.
I have a question. Can I be heard?
Hold on. I'll take public comments right at the end, Charlotte, if that's okay, because
Okay.
Okay, with appreciation. So what I'm wondering if board members want to do to figure out an immediate next step is that I think there needs to be a little more reflection, and I want to come back to this with the right kind of energy and intentionality. And so what I am wondering if a good place to begin, and let me know if you would like to add something different or take or what have you, is write what we have heard to date from members of our public. Additionally, I appreciate anything that you are reading perhaps about these issues. Marcia has alluded to several things that she is reading. I know that Claudette, and I know that we all have. So things that you might be reading, and then things that you have heard. So rather than what we are thinking, but rather what we're hearing from our community, and then also what we're reading elsewhere, I think that would be a good place potentially to begin, because we'll need something far more deliberate. Go ahead, Claudette.
Charlotte.
My personal bias is that this is something that is outside of the regularly scheduled select board meetings.
Agreed.
And I also feel strongly that we would benefit immensely from a facilitator.
Yes.
So those are my two. This community discussion should be facilitated, and it should be outside of the regular scheduled select board meetings.
I agree. Okay, that makes sense to me. Any other thoughts on a way forward? You don't necessarily disagree with my sort of what I suggested as a way forward? Perhaps we could use that to hand off to a facilitator.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine.
But I hear you. Okay.
I'd be okay with Claudette's suggestion. I just think we're getting a little tired, and we've talked about the subject, and just a fresh look at it.
I'll take a little more public comments, and then we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come back to figure out
other things.
And we're going to reschedule the rest of our meeting, quite frankly.
Before we do that, Roger, I'm just wondering if there's a benefit actually to having a formal motion on the interim plan.
Okay, I will entertain another motion.
So I move that we proceed with the interim police chief plan presented in our board packet.
I'll second it.
Okay, seconded by Mary. Any discussion? Okay, so I'll roll call this vote. Mary, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Claudette, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rob, how do you vote?
Yes.
Marcia, how do you vote?
No.
And I'm a yes. Okay. Thank
All
you
right.
for that, for the record. That's important. Okay, so let's take a 10-minute break and then come back, if that's okay. Actually, no, I want to hear a little more from the public, just a little bit more. Go ahead, Charlotte Metcalf.
Thank you. Some years ago, as you know, we voted to have a full complement of police in the town. How is it possible that without a town vote, which we had at that time, we are changing the number of police who are canvassing and taking care of us without a further vote? I believe that's what we need to do today before reducing the number of police.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that public comment. And then, if I may, Charlotte, do you have any memory of that? Actually, no, I'm gonna research that further. We'll research that further, but thank you for that.
In the early 2000s.
Okay.
Yes, I mean, in fact, the town has referred, you as a group have referred to the most recent, which was way back, study that was done relative to the one that you are doing now. So I believe you probably have the record.
Right. Yes.
Thank you, Roger.
We're aware of the 2000 study, but thank you, Charlotte, for that.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Richard Adams.
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Hi, sorry, maybe this doesn't look so good with video. I just wanted to thank you all. I think that this is a really, really hard topic, as you've acknowledged. I really think that the board specifically and the town manager have been doing a really nice job being respectful, listening to people. And like others have said, you know, this is not other towns and other places. I think Norwich is a special place. And part of that is that we can talk to each other and really listen to everyone and try to take care of everybody. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Alka, Deb, go ahead.
Yes, I want to second Richard's gratitude to the select board for taking this on and giving it so much due time and discussion. I just want to add that, following up on Ms. Metcalf's comment about the police taking care of us, I think we have maybe a lot of views on what it means to be taken care of. And I certainly don't look to the police to take care of me or my family in this town, at least, you know, not on a day-to-day basis. And so hopefully, as this discussion moves forward, we can also integrate some very concrete and you know, scientifically valid ways of figuring out what needs taken care of. And, you know, I think it's great to put things to public comment, but there are also just methodological ways in which we can figure out what the needs are of people in this town beyond safety and security. And I certainly would be bringing that to the select board in the future in terms of a community public health survey, in terms of looking at some really, you know, important needs that people in this community might have that could benefit from some of the resources that our taxes generate.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Okay, any further public comment? Okay. So I'm gonna now take a 10-minute break, and we're gonna come back and talk about the rest of our meeting, as I hinted at, probably to reschedule the rest of our meeting. So let's take a 10-minute break with appreciation to you all. And so at 9:54, we'll see you. Thank you, everyone. Okay, resuming the April 28th Select Board meeting at 9:54. I'm going to make a motion and then we'll discuss it. So I move that we table the remaining agenda items for our April 28th meeting and schedule a special meeting to discuss them on Wednesday, May 5th. Is there a second?
I will second your motion.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion?
I think it's wise. It took a lot out of us to go through all the things on our agenda tonight.
And I think we'll fail to say that we're setting goals if we delay any further on setting them, because we need time to implement whatever goals there are. So I think it's really, so we have to, and it's another special meeting, and with apologies. I felt that we needed to hear from whoever wanted to speak.
I think that was very fair. It was a great way to handle it.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Go ahead, Claudette.
not on your motion, but I hope that the public who did not support our path forward clearly understands, and especially our police force and Sergeant Keeling, who I see is still here, that we do, I mean, we hear what has been said, we empathize, and it's a difficult time right now, and I as I said before, we're damned if we do, damned if we don't, and I just think we need to be extremely thoughtful in how we proceed.
Yes.
I think it could actually be exciting. We could, cover some new ground. So I'm looking forward to it. But tonight was hard.
And I think it's going to get harder in different ways for capital planning. Herb has also put together a lot of asset inventories from all the departments, and so we'll have a lot of material to look at and go through, in addition to all of the memos that people have put forward as well. So it'll, yeah. So if people and any other discussion, because it sounds like people are in favor. There's some consensus that we should have this special meeting.
Sounds like a good idea.
I think it's a good idea. Should we vote on it?
Yes, let's call the question. All in favor, please raise your hand. Okay. With thanks, and especially thanks to Herb and Miranda, who will be joining us again next week. This was also a very difficult week for the town manager's office. They've received a lot of correspondence and a lot of calls. I know also it's been suggested that the police department has also received some calls particular to this agenda item. So I think there's a lot of information that people crave, as well as an analysis and a point of view. So Claudette is right. We need to be thoughtful.
Yeah. And dispel the misinformation that is also out there.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, so we passed that motion, and now is there a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, raise your hand. Okay, it was made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Miranda, did you get that? Okay. All right. With thanks to everyone. See you next week, it looks like. And I'll be in touch, Miranda and Herb, with the agenda that you can just send out.
Do we vote on that?
We did. We all raised.
We did.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
All right. Good night, everybody. Take care.